Germany of Iron and Blood. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 776, Storm. Groups of British soldiers, bowing their waists and holding rifles, attacked the German positions under the cover of night. Perhaps because of the relatively hot weather, almost every British soldier was sweating profusely. Even the sea breeze could not reduce the heat in their hearts. Of course, the more reason may be the fear in their hearts. During the daytime battles, these British officers and soldiers were shocked by the fighting power displayed by the German army, especially the strong fire support possessed by the German army, which made them very frightened. Because this means that their attack this time is very likely to encounter strong firepower from the German army. At that time, I don't know how many people will lose their lives because of this. Damn Germans. Why did they invade the British Empire? So we had to fight them to the death. Originally, I should have stayed at home and lived a happy life with my wife and children. A British soldier muttered softly. Idiot, shut up. Do you want the Germans to know that we are launching a sneak attack? Don't kill us all because of you. An officer shouted in a low voice. The British soldier immediately shut his mouth, not daring to say another word. Because they wanted to avoid being discovered by the German army, the advance speed of the British army was very slow. The closer they were to the German line of defense, the slower they were. Everyone knows that once they are exposed, what awaits them is probably the powerful firepower of the German army. At that time, they don't know how many people will die here. The top British army attaches great importance to this night attack, which is related to whether they can drive the Germans into the sea. If successful, they will regain lost ground. At the same time, it will boost the morale of the troops. If the Germans want to land in Britain again and defeat them, it will not be so easy. If it fails, then they will not be able to prevent the main force of the German army from landing in Britain. At that time, they will have to fight a decisive battle with the main force of the German army. It is very difficult for them to defeat the German army in the end, or even cause greater damage to the German army. Have the troops set off yet? Hamilton asked his adjutant. Yes, General. The three main armies each sent 3 elite infantry divisions to participate in this night attack. The Germans did not land many troops, and they should not be able to withstand the surprise attack. Stop our attack, the adjutant said. Hamilton shook his head. The Germans are not fools, and they also know that tonight is the most difficult night for them. As long as they survive tonight, they will truly gain a foothold in the empire. If we want to defeat them, we must. It's not that easy anymore. So, they'll definitely be ready tonight. General, in this way, is it less likely that we will survive the night attack? The adjutant was a little nervous. Even if the Germans knew that we were going to launch a night attack, they didn't have a good way to prepare for it. In the end, it was still a confrontation between the strengths of the two sides. If God bless us, we may really be able to defeat the Germans. Hamilton said. The Admiral. God will bless the British Empire. We will be able to defeat the Germans. The adjutant looked determined. The frontline generals of the British army also believed that God would bless them. That's why this night the attack was launched desperately, hoping to use this opportunity to drive the German troops who landed into the sea in one fell swoop. A British soldier was walking. Suddenly, he stopped, and his face changed drastically. Idiot. Why don't you leave soon? An officer scolded. Sir, I seem to have stepped on a landmine. The soldier said with a sad face. What? Landmines? Got. The Germans planted landmines. The officer almost got up. The British soldiers around them also felt as if they were facing an enemy, and they did not dare to move, for fear that they would also step on a landmine. Sir, what should I do? The soldier asked. Don't move. I order you not to move from now on. I will find a way. The officer also looked anxious. It's just that he doesn't have to worry about it right away. Because, in addition, someone stepped on a landmine. Boom. An unlucky guy stepped on a torpedo buried by the German army, not only blowing himself to pieces, but also exposing the actions of the British army. Immediately afterwards, landmines exploded one after another. The losses caused to the British army were secondary, and the real major losses were mainly to expose their plans. This also means that they will be hit by fierce firepower from the German army. Damn it. I stepped on a landmine. Admiral Haig's face turned livid. Who? On the German position, when the mine sounded, the soldiers were awakened. Sleeping in their clothes, they immediately held their weapons and prepared to fight. Mortars fired flare after flare into the sky. The dazzling white expanse dispelled the darkness and illuminated the surroundings. The figures of the British soldiers were also fully revealed under the white light of the flares. Fire! The frontline commander of the German army immediately issued an order. Da. Squad machine guns and general purpose machine guns started firing crazily. Orange flames shone at the muzzle of the gun, and the dense bullets formed a steel storm, covering the attacking British soldiers. Countless British soldiers were shot and fell to the ground screaming, "Damn it, go." The officers of the British army roared loudly. Now that a sneak attack is no longer possible, the only option is to launch a strong attack. If they escape, they will leave their backs in front of the German machine guns, causing even greater casualties. For the British Empire, charge. A large number of British soldiers, shouting slogans, braved the hail of bullets and launched a violent charge towards the German positions. However, what greeted them was the powerful machine gun fire on the German positions, mortar and grenade fire, and rifle bullets in the hands of ordinary soldiers. On the artillery position behind, a door of 75mm field guns and 105mm light howitzers also started firing. This is a cannon equipped by the infantry divisions that landed. However, the 150mm heavy howitzer is too heavy, and there is no perfect loading and unloading equipment, so it has not been loaded and unloaded yet. The naval warships moored in the sea also started shelling immediately. A series of small and medium caliber naval guns started firing. The power of the large caliber naval gun is too great, and the distance between the two sides is too close. In order to avoid being accidentally injured, the large caliber main gun did not fire. But even so, the powerful firepower is enough for the British to drink a pot. Chapter 777. Fight hard. Who? Flare bombs continued to rise into the sky, and the dazzling white light illuminated the surroundings, as if it were daytime. The British soldiers were immediately massacred by the powerful firepower of the German army. All kinds of exposed machine guns, rifles, grenade launchers, and mortars poured out their firepower crazily regardless of cost, causing great casualties to the attacking British soldiers. Boom. 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 The dense shells fell like raindrops. In the case of marking the shooting element in advance, it can be ensured that these shells fall in front of the German positions, and generally speaking, it is impossible to accidentally injure one's own people. Countless British soldiers were torn to pieces in the explosion of shells, and their limbs and arms flew everywhere. Although the night covered up this hellish scene. However, the smell of blood in the air became more and more intense, almost unbearable. Artillery. Let our artillery fire immediately. Bombard the German positions. Their firepower is too strong, otherwise, we will not be able to hold on. Admiral Haig ordered. Although he was on the French battlefield, he had already seen the powerful firepower of the German army. However, he had to admit that he still underestimated the powerful firepower of the German army. After a few months of rest, the firepower of the German army seems to have become stronger. Moreover, it also has a complete set of tactics to deal with the enemy's night attack. This is definitely not good news for the British, because this means that it will be more difficult for them to win this battle and drive the Germans into the sea. Even if you pay a higher price, you may not be able to succeed. But General, our troops are not far from the German position. It is night again, and if we open fire, we may cause accidental injury. A general was a little worried. The Germans are not afraid, so why should we be afraid? Their warships even dare to fire at sea. We can't be worse than them. Admiral Haig said. Yes, General. The artillery general had no choice but to direct the artillery to fire. During the daytime battle, the artillery losses of the British army were not small. Facing the bombing of the German Navy's naval guns and the Army Air Force, many British cannons and artillery were destroyed. The remaining cannon and artillery, less than half of the day. Even those coastal defense artillery with solid defenses also suffered a lot of losses. After all, the 380mm main guns of the battleships of the German Navy are extremely powerful. In particular, the shells fired by naval guns with a caliber of 50 times have such a powerful armor-piercing ability that even the coastal artillery defenses cannot resist it. After receiving the order from Admiral Haig, the artillerymen of the British Army should bite the bullet and start firing. They started shelling according to the pre-marked shooting element and the actual situation reported by the frontline observers, trying not to throw shells on their own heads as much as possible. However, in terms of shooting skills, the British are indeed unable to compare with the Germans. A lot of shells still fell into the attacking British Army, causing a lot of casualties. But at the same time, they also caused a lot of casualties to the Germans' army. In the case of black lights and blind fire, the attacking British Army did not know which side fired the shells, and fell into their own queue, so they could only blame all this on the Germans. Boom. A 114mm artillery shell fell on the German position, and several German soldiers who were manipulating their rifles to fire were immediately blown up. When it fell to the ground, it had already become pieces of mincemeat. When more and more artillery shells fired by the British Army fell into the German positions, the German casualties also continued to rise. Bastard. Let the artillery suppress the British artillery fire. Our position is too narrow. If the British keep firing at us crazily, we will suffer heavy losses under their artillery fire. German Marine Corps Commander Alexander, Lieutenant General Linsingen ordered. Under the order of Lieutenant General Alexander Linsingen, the German warships moored on the sea immediately began to shift their shelling targets and began to suppress the British artillery. However, due to the influence of the night, the suppression effect is not very good. Even if the 380mm main guns and 280mm main guns of several battleships are added, it is the same. After all, it is necessary to shell a target more than 10 kilometers away. If it is in the daytime, it can also be adjusted according to the impact point. But at night, the line of sight is severely restricted, and more can only rely on luck. But even so, the German artillery bombardment still caused a lot of casualties to the British artillery, and the pressure on the frontline German Army and Marine Corps was also much smaller because of this. The battle was still very fierce. The 3 elite infantry divisions of the British Army frantically attacked the German positions. The German Army used powerful firepower to stop them. The shells that fell from time to time caused great losses to both sides. But overall, the price paid by the British Army is still much higher than that of the German Army. A British heavy machine gun moved to the front line and opened fire violently less than 100 meters away from the German defense line. The dense bullets immediately killed several German soldiers, and the rest of the German soldiers were also suppressed. Mortar, grenadier, fire me. Get rid of the British heavy machine gun. A second lieutenant platoon leader ordered. The 60mm mortar and 2 grenadiers immediately started shooting. Boom. 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 A mortar shell and grenades fired by 2 grenades hit the heavy machine gun of the British Army, not only blowing the heavy machine gun into parts, but also tearing the machine gunners to pieces. The suppressed German army was able to continue firing, sifting the British troops who attempted to approach the German defense line. Come on. Defeat the Germans and drive them into the sea to feed the fish. The soldiers of the British Army roared frantically and charged heroically towards the German positions. However, what greeted them was indeed the intensive firepower fired from the German defense line. I don't know how many British soldiers were killed, and the corpses had piled up in a thick layer in front of the German line of defense. Blood flowed from the bodies of these British soldiers, staining the ground red. God, aren't those British afraid of death? We have killed so many of them, but they don't seem to be timid at all. This is different from the British we met before. A machine gunner muttered with, the British we meet now should be their elite main force. They are naturally different from those mobs. As long as we kill all the British, the rest will be nothing to worry about, said a second lieutenant platoon leader. Chapter 778, Persistence is Victory. Calais, the German combat command against the British homeland. Although it was already late at night, Marshal von Falkenhayn still did not rest. As he was getting older, his health was getting worse and worse. In order to stay up late, he even had to ask the adjutant to make a pot of coffee, and if he couldn't hold on anymore, he would drink a cup to refresh himself. How is the situation on the front line? Marshal von Falkenhayn asked. Your Excellency Marshal, the battle on the front line is very fierce. The British seem to be desperate, attacking our defense line crazily. The artillery of the British is also firing fiercely, which caused our frontline troops to lose a lot. The adjutant reported. Can the front line hold on? Marshal von Falkenhayn frowned. He knew that this time the British attack must have cost a lot of money. In order to drive the German army into the sea, the British invested a real main force. In this case, if the German army wants to hold on, I'm afraid it will have to pay a higher price. Marshal, according to reports from the front, although our losses are constantly rising, but overall, we have caused greater losses to the British. We should be able to persist, said the adjutant. Marshal von Falkenhayn nodded his head and finally put his heart, that had been hanging in his stomach, back into his stomach. It is only a few hours before dawn. Let the troops on the front line hold on, and they will receive stronger fire support at dawn. At that time, the Navy and Army Air Force will provide them with more support. Other troops of the army will continue to land. Marshal von Falkenhayn said. Yes, Your Excellency the Marshal. The adjutant nodded. A telegram to the Navy and Army Air Corps as well, to get them ready. As soon as day breaks, I hope to hear that they have dropped shells and bombs on the British. Field Marshal von Falkenhayn then he said. Okay, Your Excellency Marshal, I will immediately contact the Navy and Army Air Corps. The adjutant immediately went to send a telegram. Although the war was very tragic, overall, it was still very beneficial to the German army. On the defensive side, they not only received strong fire support, but also were able to reduce their own casualties with the help of fortifications. This made the casualties of the German army much less than that of the British army. Hold on, it will be dawn in a few hours. At that time, we will get more support. The British will pay a price they can't afford. The German officers on the front line kept talking. Cheer up the soldiers. Yes, sir. The soldiers replied one after another. They also all know that tonight will be the hardest. As long as they persist until dawn, they will win. At that time, the powerful firepower from the sea and the air will cause great casualties to the British, and they will be able to easily resist the British attack, and even launch a counterattack to further expand their beachhead. On the German position, a general-purpose machine gun was firing crazily. Relying on the intensive firepower, this general-purpose machine gun and the rifles in the hands of several infantrymen made this section of defense line more than 20 meters long stop the attack of a large number of British troops. Are more than 100 corpses left by the British army in front of this line of defense. However, the British offensive continued. They are still trying to launch an offensive, trying to tear through the German defenses. Damn, if we can destroy the German machine gun, we can't tear their defense line at all, said a British captain officer. His company was about to be crippled. What about the mortars? How many mortars do we have? A second lieutenant platoon leader asked. This is the last one. The others were lost in the previous battle. The captain officer said. Sir, let's try again. Destroy the British machine guns with mortars, and then attack immediately, tearing their defense line. If we can tear a hole in their defense line, we can break through their defense line in one fell swoop. Alright. The second lieutenant platoon leader suggested. Okay, let's do it like this. The captain officer nodded. The mortars of the British army were quickly set up, and 2 minutes later they began to shell the heavy machine gun of the German army. Boom. Perhaps it was because of the better luck of the British. This shell accurately hit the general-purpose machine gun of the German army. After the shells exploded, the general-purpose machine guns were already blown out. The machine gunner was also killed on the spot, but the deputy shooter was luckier, but he was scratched a little by the shrapnel. However, after losing the suppressed firepower of this general-purpose machine gun, the suppressed British army immediately launched a violent attack. They quickly broke through the German defense line, and the German troops guarding this line of defense were quickly overwhelmed by the British soldiers pouring in like a tide. Quick, we have broken through the German defense line. Further expand the results of the battle and completely tear their defense line. The British frontline commander shouted excitedly. More and more British soldiers also discovered that this position had been breached and rushed here one after another, trying to tear through the German defense line. The German army, which was on the defensive, also discovered this. 2nd Regiment, immediately reinforce. No matter what, we must resist the British. Lieutenant General Alexander St. John ordered with red eyes. Yes, General. The 2nd Regiment of the 1st Division of the Marine Corps rushed to reinforce immediately. After experiencing the big battle during the day, the 1st Marine Division lost a lot. So, after the Army's 1st and 2nd Infantry Divisions arrived, the defense was left to them as used as a reserve. The addition of thousands of fresh troops instantly stabilized the originally shaky line of defense. Although, some of the battles were more intense hand-to-hand combat. However, they were all suppressed by the powerful fighting power erupted by the German army. In particular, some amphibious tanks also came to help in the battle, which dealt a fatal blow to the British army. Despite operating at night, the Marine Corps amphibious tanks have many inconveniences. However, the British army that launched the night attack did not carry decent anti-tank weapons, which made them face the German tanks. Under such circumstances there could be no doubt that the British were driven from their positions. After a fierce battle, the British troops who entered the German positions were either killed or driven out of the German positions. Chapter 779, Counterattack. General, we finally tore through the German line of defense. However, they were finally driven out. The Germans even used tanks for this. An officer reported to Admiral Haig. Damn it. Admiral Haig couldn't help cursing. He was keenly aware that this seemed to be their only chance to break through the German defenses. If you miss this opportunity, it will be even more difficult in the future. Looking at his watch, it was already 2 o'clock in the morning on August 22nd, and there were still 3 hours before dawn. At that time, the Germans will definitely launch firepower against the British army frantically. Admiral Haig did not think that the British army could hold on under the heavy shelling of the German navy and the heavy strafing and bombing of German aircraft. At that time, what is waiting for the troops is very likely to be a major defeat. No, we can't just admit defeat like this. Otherwise, it will be even more difficult to defeat the Germans. Admiral Haig secretly warned himself. If the planned goal is not achieved this time, what awaits them will be the attack of the elite German troops. At that time, will they be able to resist it? Anyway, Admiral Haig didn't quite believe it. Even though Margate assembled 2 British armies with a total of 400,000 troops. But he still didn't know anything about it. Order the 4th Infantry Division and go into battle. This time, we must tear through the German defenses. Admiral Haig gritted his teeth and gave the order. With no other choice, he could only deploy more reserve teams to fight. Coincidentally, the British 2nd Army and 3rd Army also felt the urgency of time. In order to tear apart the German defenses, they put all their eggs in one basket and kept throwing more reserves into the attack. If it weren't for the fact that the German army's defense line was relatively narrow and could not accommodate more troops to participate in the attack, they might have invested more troops. Of course, in the current situation, more troops are invested, and the formation tends to be very dense when attacking. In that case, it will only cause the troops to suffer more heavy losses under the intensive firepower of the Germans. The fierce battle was staged on the beach on the west coast of the Strait of Dover. Hundreds of thousands of British and German allied troops fought the most tragic fight on this beach. On the beach, a thick layer of corpses had already been piled up, and the blood even soaked the sand. The smell of blood in the air was even stronger, and made people want to vomit. But even so, no one cares. What they care about is how to defeat the enemy, and eliminate the enemy. This is a matter of the fate of the countries of both parties. Therefore, these brave soldiers can only ignore life and death, and devote themselves to the killing. Only when the enemy is killed, or oneself is killed, can it be stopped. Kill. A group of British soldiers rushed to the German defense line, and immediately, a tragic hand-to-hand battle began. The soldiers stabbed the bayonets in their hands fiercely into the enemy's body. The hindrance of the bayonet piercing into the human body, coupled with the howling from the enemy's mouth, made people feel creepy. However, generally speaking, on the battlefield, not many people would care about these. They have to be tough. Otherwise, they might be the ones who lost their lives. Under the tragic fight between the two sides, time passed bit by bit. The German line of defense, despite being breached several times. However, after the German reserve team joined, they were able to drive the British army out of their positions every time and firmly control the position in their own hands. The cannons on both sides have been roaring. The German army suffered heavy losses under the heavy shelling of the British artillery. But at the same time, the artillery shells fired by the German warships from the sea also caused heavy losses to the British artillery. How's the situation on the front line? Admiral Hamilton was anxious like ants on a hot pot. General, we broke through the German defenses several times. However, in the end, they were all beaten back by the Germans. The troops participating in the offensive at the front suffered a lot of losses. Several armies have already dispatched more reserves. The German army participated in the attack. However, it still failed. The Germans are still firmly in control of their defense line. The troops on the front line are making the last effort. The adjutant reported. Damn. After losing so many troops, are you still unable to tear through the German defenses? How can we continue this battle? Admiral Hamilton couldn't help cursing. If the Germans cannot be driven into the sea, it means that they may have to face a hard battle in the future. This is very detrimental to the British army. Landing on the beach can often cause greater casualties to the Germans. If this advantage is given up, the British army will not be an opponent of the German army in field battles, even though they have a great advantage in military strength. However, even the elite troops are not the opponents of the German army, let alone those recruits who have just been recruited and took up arms. If they are really sent to the battlefield, I'm afraid it will only become a drag. Send a telegram to the frontline troops so that they will attack regardless of the cost without losing time. Our time is running out and we must hurry up. Otherwise, the consequences will be very serious. Admiral Hamilton said. At this juncture, he can only continue to put pressure on the generals on the front line. But it worked, and not even Admiral Hamilton himself knew it. At 4 o'clock in the morning, at the airport of the German Army Air Force on the coast of Calais, the ground crew was refueling the aircraft and adding ammunition. The pilots are having breakfast. Although, the sky is not bright yet. But they must be ready for battle in advance. As soon as it was daylight, they had to take off immediately. On the west bank of the strait, the army and marines are fighting the enemy desperately. If they cannot take off in time to provide support to the army and marine corps, the troops on the front line will definitely suffer greater losses. At 4:30, the pilots boarded the flagship plane one after another. At this moment, there is a faint light in the sky. 20 minutes later, the command tower issued an order for the fighter plane to take off. One after another, fighter jets and bombers took off from the artillery shells and flew west of the strait. With the speed of these planes, it only takes 10 minutes for them to fly over the battlefield. On the frontline battlefield, both the British army on the offensive side and the German army on the defensive side are exhausted at this moment. The only thing that rejoices the Germans is that the line of defense is still in their hands, and their counterattack is about to begin. Chapter 780, Route. General, it will be dawn soon, what should we do? A lieutenant general asked with a worried expression on his face. Admiral Haig's complexion is also very ugly at the moment. The German defense line is too strong, and their fighting will is unexpectedly strong. This made the British army pay a great price in the one-night attack, but they had nothing to do with the German defense line. They could only watch helplessly as a thick layer of corpses piled up in front of the German defense line. It's dawn, and it's impossible for us to break through the German defense line. The German warships and planes are about to launch a large-scale bombardment and bombing of us. Under such circumstances, if we continue to attack, it will only let us the troops are going to die. Admiral Haig said helplessly. Yes, General. It seems that the situation is going to be very unfavorable to us. The other generals also said. Everyone is very worried about the current development of the war situation. Command the troops. Prepare to retreat. Admiral Haig ordered. Yes, General. The adjutant immediately went to convey the order. Although, retreating now makes the generals of the British army very unwilling. However, they also know that this is impossible. If they don't retreat, they will only pay a higher price. The German generals on the front line breathed a sigh of relief. It was already dawn, and their crisis could be regarded as lifted. They can also be regarded as gaining a firm foothold in the UK. Next, as long as more troops continue to land on the British mainland, they can launch a large-scale offensive. The next battle situation will develop in their favor. Report. To the General. The command is calling. The Army Air Force is about to launch an airstrike on the British. The naval guns will also launch a large-scale bombardment on the British immediately. The Army's 3rd, 4th, and 5th Infantry Divisions will land later. The headquarters instructed us to mobilize troops that can continue to fight and launch a counterattack after the naval bombardment and Air Force airstrikes are over to further expand the results of the battle. A staff officer reported. Immediately instruct the troops to take the time to rest. After the naval bombardment and the air support of the Army Air Corps start, they are ready to launch a counterattack. After being suppressed by the British all night, it is time for us to launch a counterattack. Alexander? Lieutenant General Lin St. John ordered. Yes, General. The staff officer immediately went to convey the order. Although the soldiers on the front line were very tired, they still ate bread with the hot soup brought by the cooking soldiers. After a night of fighting, they were already exhausted. However, in order to have sufficient physical strength to fight back in the future, they still ate their breakfast in toss and then took the time to squint. Boom. 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 The Navy's naval guns began to shell violently, and the dense shell slammed hard at the British Army, who was about to retreat. The power of these naval guns were already astonishing. Under the bombardment of naval guns, the British paid a huge price. Boom. Or 380mm artillery shell hit a truck that was being loaded with shells and was about to evacuate, causing a martyrdom explosion, killing all the British soldiers around. Retreat. Accelerate the retreat. The British generals on the front line ordered immediately. They all realized that a large-scale German counterattack was coming soon. Under the powerful firepower of the German army, it is almost impossible for them to resist the German counterattack. Run. The Germans are coming soon. Countless British soldiers frantically wanted to escape from the battlefield. They were terrified by the fierce battle last night. In their hearts, they even think that the Germans are invincible. Buzz buzz. There was a sound like wild bees flying in the sky, and some British soldiers raised their heads and looked towards the sky. Immediately, they discovered that small black dots had appeared in the eastern sky. British soldiers who have experienced fierce battles with the Germans know what those little black dots represent. Plane. Plane. The German plane is coming. The British soldiers shouted in horror. The aircraft strafing and bombing of the German Army Air Corps also left a great feeling in the hearts of the British soldiers. They did not know how many comrades were killed by the German aircraft with aviation machine guns, or were dropped by the aircraft. Bomb kills. Da da da. The fighter jets began to dive and shoot, killing the British soldiers with aviation machines guns. British soldiers were constantly shot and fell to the ground screaming. Boom. An aerial bomb fell into the ranks of the retreating British army. Dozens of British soldiers were killed. Lie down. Lie down and dodge immediately. A British officer shouted loudly, instructing the British soldiers how to avoid the enemy's air attack. But then, he was hit by a bullet from an aviation machine gun, and his body was directly cut in two. Under the airstrikes by fighter planes of the German Army Air Force, the British Army suffered great losses. At this time, the German Army and Marine Corps launched a counterattack. With the support of naval guns and fighter planes of the Army Air Force, they launched a fierce attack on the retreating British Army. Faced with such a blow, the British Army simply couldn't hold on. I surrender. I don't want to fight anymore. A young British soldier threw away his weapon and raised his hand to surrender to the German army. The power of role models is infinite. When morale was seriously affected, other British soldiers also surrendered one after another. This made the German counterattack a great success without any effort. There are still a large number of British soldiers who do not want to surrender, and they flee desperately. In order to speed up his escape, he even threw away his weapons and equipment. This made the retreat of the British army no longer a retreat, and it should be called a rout. The counterattack of the German army broke through several lines of defense that deployed the British army on the coast. The British soldiers could only flee back to the urban area and hold on. However, these urban areas are also within the strike range of the German naval guns, and fighter planes of the German Army Air Force can also bomb them. Therefore, even if the British army hid in the urban area, they could not escape. However, the German army did not take advantage of the situation to attack the cities occupied by the British army. On the one hand, the British had already built a large number of fortifications in those cities, and if they attacked rashly, they would suffer too many casualties. In addition, the soldiers have been fighting fiercely all night, and are very tired. Waiting for the follow-up troops to arrive is a good opportunity to launch an attack. Chapter 781, Battle. The German 1st Army, 2nd Army and 3rd Army, in Margate, Dover and Folkestone, not only successfully withstood the counter-attack of the British Army, but also caused great casualties to the British Army. You know, what they wiped out were all the relay lead troops of the British Army. This can play a big role in defeating the British Army in the following battles. In addition, in the counter-attack on the morning of the 22nd, the British Army's defense line on the coast was successfully captured, and the British Army was driven back to the urban areas of several cities to defend. At the same time, a large number of follow-up troops of the German army began to land on the British mainland, preparing to launch a larger scale attack. Calais, German command against Britain. Although Marshal von Falkenhayn did not rest all night, he was still in high spirits. The army resisted the British attack on the front line, and at the same time successfully launched a counter-attack, further expanding its own control area, and making the beachhead more stable. This made Marshal von Falkenhayn very satisfied. The commanders of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Legions also rushed to the headquarters, and everyone's faces were full of smiles. Although, the fierce battle last night caused a lot of casualties to the troops. But anyway, they persisted. Next, it is their turn to launch a large-scale counter-attack. Good job. The soldiers on the front line are all doing well. Facing the crazy counter-attack of the British, we still persevered. The balance of victory in this war has tilted towards us again. Von Falkenhayn Marshal Yin said. Yes, Your Excellency the Marshal. We have successfully established a foothold in the British mainland. The follow-up troops are still in the process of landing. As long as our main force completes the landing, we will be able to launch a large-scale counter-attack. With us it should not be difficult to defeat the British with the strong combat effectiveness of our army. Admiral Crook was very optimistic about the upcoming battle situation. Your Excellency, Marshal, although the British still have a huge force, the troops they invested last night should be the real elite main force. Even their elites are not our opponents. Could it be that the newly formed mob can defeat us? That is undoubtedly even more impossible. General Beluo also said. Well, it's like this. Speed up the disembarkation of the main force as much as possible. After the main force arrives in the British mainland, you can launch a large-scale attack. Marshal von Falkenhayn said. Your Excellency, the disembarkation speed of our main force has been greatly affected. Especially heavy weapons, such as heavy artillery, tanks, and armored vehicles. Due to the lack of professional docks, the loading and unloading speed has been greatly restricted. High Admiral Sen said. Those piers were blown up by the British before the battle broke out. It is impossible to use those piers. Only let the engineers find a way to build some simple piers. Then transport a batch of professional machinery from the country the equipment has passed. Try to speed up the loading and unloading as much as possible. I will personally greet the logistics department and let them solve this difficulty for you as soon as possible. Marshal von Falkenhayn said. Yes, Your Excellency Marshal. The generals replied one after another. Canterbury, British South East Theatre Command. General Hamilton, the commander of the British Army's local forces and the commander of the South East Theatre, his face was already dark, as if it was the bottom of the pot. Not to mention the disastrous defeat of last night's attack. The counter-attack launched by the German army this morning caused heavy losses to the British army. Now, the main group armies of the British army can only retreat to the urban area to resist. This is undoubtedly an extremely major blow to the British army. General, the 1st Army suffered a lot of losses. The 4 main infantry divisions that participated in the attack last night suffered heavy losses to varying degrees. The morale of the troops was also greatly affected. Especially the 6th Army. There are a lot of recruits, and they are even more frightened by the Germans. Admiral Haig said. The situation of the 2nd Army is similar. 4 infantry divisions have been disabled, with a loss of more than 30,000 people. The rest of the troops have withdrawn to Dover. However, the German naval guns and aircraft are endlessly the fortifications we built in the city were destroyed by their shelling and bombing. The casualties of soldiers are also increasing. If this continues, I'm afraid that we will not have to wait until the Germans launch an attack. The troops collapsed. Admiral Benson also said, the loss of the Third Army is not small. Once the Germans gather the main force to launch an attack, it will be difficult for us to resist. Admiral Gough also said, Admiral Hamilton's face was very ugly. He knew that the current situation was very unfavorable for the British Army. If they are not careful, they will face a disastrous defeat in the Southeast Theatre. The Southeast Theatre has assembled the most elite troops of the British Army. If they can't resist the German attack here, will they be able to beat the Germans next? That will probably be very difficult. General, the Germans are now shelling and bombing the urban areas, where our troops are stationed with warships and aircraft. The troops on the front line have suffered great losses. Can we think of other ways? Admiral Haig asked. Gentlemen, I think we might be able to evacuate Margate, Dover and Folkestone, and come to Canterbury. Here, away from the coast. The German naval guns will hardly threaten us. Then we will have no fear. We are threatened by the German naval guns again. If it is only the German planes, we can send out the Air Force to contain them. In addition, we will gather the main force here, and we will have enough troops to fight the Germans. This is a large-scale battle. If we can win, we may be able to withstand the German attack. Even let them pay enough price in this battle, and finally have to give up our attack. Admiral Hamilton said. Admiral Haig, Admiral Benson, and Admiral Gough all frowned. They understood what Admiral Hamilton meant, that is, to abandon the coast and retreat to the inland, in order to weaken the Germans' superiority in firepower. Then gather the advantages of troops and fight a big battle with the Germans. The outcome of this battle determines how to fight the next battle. If the British Army can win the battle, then the situation will develop in favor of the British Army. If it fails, the entire Southeast Theatre will probably be corrupted. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 782, British Intentions. Your Excellency, I personally agree with a major battle with the Germans at Canterbury. We will indeed have a lot of advantages in a battle with the Germans here. At least we can gather 5 armies to deal with the 2 armies of the Germans. Add 2 marine divisions. The 3rd and 8th armies can retreat further to Maidstone to deal with the Germans with 1 corps and 1 marine division. No matter which battlefield we are on, we have a large number of troops, great advantage. If we play well, we are still very sure of defeating the Germans. Admiral Haig said. Even if we gather 5 armies in Canterbury, there are less than 1 million people. But the Germans' 1st and 2nd Army Corps, plus 2 marine divisions, have a total of nearly 700,000 people. Our strength advantage is also very limited. The 3rd Army and the 8th Army now have less than 400,000 troops, and the German 3rd Army plus a marine division also has more than 200,000 troops. The 1.4 million people to deal with more than 900,000 German troops. Will our chances of winning really be great? Admiral Benson raised doubts about this. Admiral Hamilton nodded. It is true that our advantage does not seem to be great. However, we are fighting on the mainland and can receive reinforcement at any time. The Germans have to cross the channel. In the battle with the Germans at Canterbury, we still have to reinforcement from London. Troops can be obtained at any time. If necessary, I will mobilize London troops to reinforce us. At that time, the Germans will definitely be defeated. Your Excellency Commander, if this is the case, then I suggest that 2 elite armies be secretly dispatched from London to cooperate with the 3rd Army and the 8th Army to eliminate the German 3rd Army and the 3rd Marine Division. Then gather the main force and attack the 1st and 2nd Army Corps of the Germans and the 1st and 2nd Divisions of the Marine Corps. In this case, our chances of winning will be much greater. Admiral Gough suggested. General Hamilton shook his head. There are only 2 elite army groups in London. In order to stabilize the situation there, we cannot easily transfer those 2 army groups away. Your Excellency the Prime Minister and the Minister of War will not agree easily. If we transfer all our troops to the Southeast Theatre, if the Germans directly send troops across the North Sea to attack London, what will we have to resist? At that time, I'm afraid it will cause a complete defeat. Admiral Gough's eyes flashed a trace of unwillingness, but he knew that Admiral Hamilton's consideration was also reasonable. As the capital of the British Empire, London's safety is also very important. Once London is attacked, the consequences will be very serious. It can even cause problems for troops on the front lines. For the time being, we can only use the 7 armies in our hands to deal with the Germans' 3 corps and 3 marine divisions. The strength advantage of close to 500,000 people is already considered good. Although, I have to admit that the Germans are very powerful. However, I believe that the soldiers of the British Empire, inspired by the spirit of defending our country, our troops will not be inferior to the Germans. In addition, I have ordered the tank troops stationed in London to come to reinforce us in this battle. Our odds of winning are still very high, said Admiral Hamilton. Although General Hamilton seemed very confident, General Haig and others did not take it seriously. Compared with the German army, the elite group armies of the British army still have a big gap, let alone other troops. Defending the country can indeed inspire soldiers' fighting spirit, but it is very difficult to say whether it will work on the battlefield, or whether it will have an effect that satisfies them. However, they are not good at hitting the confidence of Admiral Hamilton. Otherwise, the next battle will be even more difficult. After confirming the battle with the German army at Canterbury, Admiral Hamilton rushed back to London and personally presented his battle plan to Prime Minister Churchill and Minister of War Richard Haldane. Churchill and Richard Haldane both agreed with Admiral Hamilton's battle plan. They also very much hope to defeat the Germans in one fell swoop in the southeastern theatre. It would be best if the fighting could not spread to London. Churchill said that if the battle situation was tense, he would order the troops in London to reinforce the southeast theatre. In addition, he will also order the Air Force to fully cooperate with the Southeast Theatre to ensure that it can gain air supremacy on the battlefield and further reduce the pressure on the ground forces. Churchill's guarantee made Hamilton full of fighting spirit. After he returned to Canterbury non-stop, he ordered the armies to start shrinking their defenses and prepare for the battle. Under the order of Admiral Hamilton, the 1st Army and 6th Army of the British Continental Army withdrew from Margate to Canterbury. The 2nd Army and 7th Army of the Continental Army also withdrew from Dover to Canterbury. The 3rd and 8th Armies of the Continental Army withdrew from Folkestone to Maidstone. The 9th Army of the Continental Army was originally stationed in Canterbury. So far, the British Continental Army has assembled 5 armies in Canterbury and 2 armies in Maidstone, for a total of 7 armies with nearly 1.4 million troops. This is already all the troops in the southeast theatre of the British mainland. Hamilton ordered these troops to assemble at Canterbury and Maidstone. It was a desperate idea, and he wanted to fight the Germans to decide the fate. While the British army was withdrawing from the coastal area, the German 1st Army, 2nd Army, and 3rd Army were withdrawing in an orderly manner. For the movements of the British army, the reconnaissance planes of the German Army Air Force have a complete grasp. However, apart from sending planes to bomb the retreating British troops, the Germans did nothing else. The retreat of the British army was a great thing for the German army. Their main force just needed enough time to land in England. If the British army continued to attack and harass them to land, it would cost them more. However, now that the British are taking the initiative to retreat, the problem is much smaller. German engineers built simple docks at sea for soldiers and equipment to disembark. In order to help heavy equipment disembark, the engineers specially reinforced the dock with steel plates, so that those tanks, armored vehicles, and heavy artillery can be loaded and unloaded smoothly. These have greatly accelerated the speed at which the main force of the German army landed in the UK. On August 27th, the main forces of the German 1st Army, 2nd Army, and 3rd Army all landed on the British mainland. Chapter 783, Response Plan. What the **** are the British doing? They actually took the initiative to shrink their troops. Doesn't this allow us to complete the landing without any worries? Even if they continue to hold on and then bombard our landing site with cannons, it will cause us a lot of damage. Lose it. Admiral Crook frowned. Who knows what they are doing? However, this is not harmful to us. At least, several of our main armies have successfully landed. This can be regarded as a real foothold in the UK. Next, if the British want to drive us into the sea again, it will be impossible. Admiral Below said. No matter what the British plan to do, we just need to launch an attack according to the predetermined plan. I don't believe that the British will be able to resist our attack if they gather their troops together. Admiral Howson is also high-spirited. The German generals believed that the British army's shrinking of the line of defense and the concentration of troops would certainly pose a certain threat to the German army. However, overall the threat is not too great. With the fighting power of the German army, it is enough to deal with these British troops. General Ludendorff, what do you think? Marshal von Falkenhayn asked. Your Excellency, Marshal, I think the British are doing this because they want to maximize their strengths and avoid weaknesses. In coastal operations, we can not only get fire support from naval warships, at the same time, we can also get air support from the Army Air Force. In addition to our original, the firepower of the infantry is much stronger than that of the British. Therefore, the British have no chance of winning against us on the coast. If we fight inland, then our firepower advantage will be offset by a lot. The naval guns, except for the large caliber main guns of the battleships, there is almost no threat to Canterbury. The Air Force can continue to bomb the British, but the British also have an Air Force. Although weaker than ours, it is not to be underestimated. In this case, the British military superiority can be reflected in a concentrated way. They may think that with sufficient military superiority, they can defeat us. Lieutenant General Ludendorff said. Marshal von Falkenhayn nodded. I think the British think so too. However, with these factors alone, it is obviously impossible to defeat us. Even if the British have more troops, they are not our opponent. Marshal von Falkenhayn seemed very confident. He was very confident in the combat effectiveness of the German army. Yes, Your Excellency the Marshal. Even if we don't get the fire support of the naval guns, the Army Air Force will be held back by them. However, we still have enough strength to defeat them. The British want to defeat us like this, then they seem too naive. Admiral Crook said. Your Excellency Marshal, the most important thing now is that the British still have a huge force in London. If we can't quickly defeat and annihilate the current enemy, once the British reinforcement arrive, the war will probably fall into a stalemate. That will be very unfavorable to us. Lieutenant General Ludendorff reminded. The faces of Marshal von Falkenhayn and others became serious. When the German army was drawing up an offensive plan against Britain, it only invested a total of 4 legions and 5 divisions of the Marine Corps, and did not plan to invest in follow-up troops. Of course, if the war situation really requires it, 1 or 2 more legions can be transferred to fight in Britain. However, neither Marshal von Falkenhayn nor the other generals wanted the situation to develop to that point. In that case, it will undoubtedly appear that the war is even more unfavorable to the German army. They all hope that with 4 legions and 5 marine divisions in their hands, they can defeat Britain. So far, except for the more than 200,000 people of the 8th Army, the rest of the troops have appeared. Therefore, once the British continue to invest more troops on the battlefield, the situation will be even more unfavorable to the German army. Everyone, do you have any suggestions for this? Marshal von Falkenhayn asked. Your Excellency, even if the British can draw troops from London, so what? We just need to launch an attack quickly and wipe out the main force of the British army entrenched in Canterbury. Then we will be invincible in this battle already. The British army assembled at Canterbury only had 5 armies in total, less than 1 million men. The 1st and 2nd armies, plus the 2 marine divisions, also had nearly 700,000 men. In terms of military strength, we are not much inferior to them. At the same time, our combat effectiveness occupies an absolute advantage. In addition, those battleships of the Navy can also use naval guns to support us. When we launch an attack on Canterbury, we ask the Navy 10 battleships bombarded Canterbury and its surrounding areas day and night, not only causing considerable casualties to the British, but also further damaging their morale. This will be very beneficial for our next battle. The Army Air Corps can also continue to bomb the British Army, weakening their effective forces as much as possible. Create more favorable combat conditions for us. Our army can take 2 armored divisions as the forerunner. quickly to Canterbury, passing through the rear, dividing and encircling millions of British people, and then annihilating them as quickly as possible. In this way, before the British react, we will already have an absolute advantage. Lieutenant General Ludendorff suggested. That's right, we still have a powerful armored force that can tear through the British line of defense. The 1st Armored Division and the 2nd Armored Division have more than 500 advanced tanks, which are enough to penetrate the British line of defense in Canterbury. Admiral Howson nodded again and again. General Ludendorff, the 8th Army may have to come in handy this time, right? Marshal von Falkenhayn said. Yes, Your Excellency the Marshal. How could the 8th Army miss such a big battle? However, I suggest changing the landing point of the 8th Army. Before, we planned to land at Bournemouth, but it is too far away from the battlefield. Too far away. I think we could have landed at Eastbourne. After the 3rd Army's attack on Maidstone caught the attention of the British, the 8th Army was at Eastbourne with top speed. Special landing. Then attack Maidstone, cooperate with the 3rd Army, and eliminate Maidstone's British Army. In this way, we will have enough troops to reinforce Canterbury. At the same time, we can also send powerful troops, stop the British reinforcement from London, Lieutenant General Ludendorff elaborated. Marshal von Falkenhayn and the others likely repeatedly after hearing this. Chapter 784, The Great War begins. Boom. 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 Strait of Dover, 5 Bavaria-class battleships, 5 König-class battleships, 5 Deutschland-class battleships and 5 Brunswick-class battleships of the German Navy, is using 380mm main guns and 280mm main guns to bombard Canterbury. Although the main guns of the Deutschland-class battleships and the Brunswick-class battleships are both 280mm main guns, their power is limited. However, it is not a big problem to hit Canterbury, which is 10 kilometers away. It can also cause great casualties to the British troops stationed here, not to mention the 380mm main guns of the Bavaria-class battleships and the King-class battleships. The maximum range is as high as more than 20 kilometers, which is enough to cover the entire Canterbury and surrounding areas within their maximum range. The power of the 380mm main gun is also more powerful. In addition, the 5 Wiechelsbach-class battleships, 5 Kaiser Friedrich III-class battleships and 4 Brandenburg-class battleships that originally provided fire support for the 3rd Army Corps and the 3rd Division of the Marine Corps-class battleships also joined in. After the British Army retreated to Maidstone, it had far exceeded the maximum range of the main guns of these former dreadnoughts. Therefore, they can only shift the target. It just so happened that the main force of the British Southeast Theatre was concentrated in Canterbury, and the German army just needed to use powerful artillery fire to hit them and cause them more casualties. Boom. 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 The continuous explosion sounded continuously in Canterbury. The warships of the German Navy fired high explosive bombs, and each shell exploded, leaving a huge crater on the ground. Buildings or animals within the killing radius will pay a heavy price for this. Boom. Or 380mm artillery shell hit a British artillery hole. The powerful 380mm artillery shells directly destroyed the anti-blasting hole, and hundreds of British soldiers were buried in it. British soldiers outside quickly started digging, trying to rescue the comrades inside. However, in the absence of sufficient mechanical equipment, it is undoubtedly very difficult to dig with bare hands. When the British soldiers buried inside were excavated, they were basically silent. Boom. A 280mm shell hit a 5-story building in Canterbury. The building collapsed in an instant, and a group of British soldiers who were passing by the street below were crushed to death. During the continuous and violent shelling of the German Navy, the British Army has already caused a lot of casualties. At the same time, this also caused the morale of the British Army to continue to decline. Many British soldiers were too frightened to leave the barracks, and even shrank directly in the artillery holes. Although, the anti-gun holes they dug were not very defensive in front of the German large-caliber naval guns. Once hit, it is likely to be bombed. However, this gave them much psychological comfort. Buzz buzz. The fighter planes of the German Army Air Force visited Canterbury again. More than 200 bombers, under the cover of hundreds of fighters, bombed Canterbury. Who? Aerial bombs one after another, like dumplings, roared and hit the urban area of Canterbury. Boom. 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 Intensive explosions sounded, and a city was reduced to ruins under the bombardment. The buildings were completely destroyed, as were the barracks and defensive positions of the British Army there. Da. The fighter jets that had completed covering the bomber's operation started their massacre after the bomber returned. These fighter jets searched for traces of British soldiers. Once found, shoot them with aviation machine guns immediately and kill them. This kind of killing game has become the favorite thing for the fighter pilots of the German Army Air Corps. Almost every time the Army Air Force launches an operation, it will cause a lot of losses to the British Army. Arsehole. How could this happen? Admiral Hamilton was about to go crazy looking at the daily losses. On the 28th, the German army began to advance to Canterbury. It's just that the advance speed of the German army is very slow, and it seems to adopt a steady tactic. However, the bombardment by the German Navy and the bombing by aircraft were very violent. On the 28th alone, more than 20,000 British soldiers died from shelling by the German Navy and bombing by aircraft. On the 29th, this number rose to 30,000 people there. It can be said that within 2 days, they lost an army. This is undoubtedly an unacceptable result for the British Army. Your Excellency, 2 days have passed, and the Germans have only advanced 3 kilometers. They seem to want to use naval and guns aircraft to destroy our vital forces. Admiral Haig's face was very ugly. There seems to be a big deviation between the development of the battle situation and what they expected before. This made the faces of these generals a little hot. Why don't we take the initiative to launch an attack? Admiral Benson suggested. No, taking the initiative to attack will also be hit by the powerful firepower of the Germans. In addition, taking the initiative to attack will also cost us more losses. Admiral Haig shook his head. So, what should we do? Are we going to wait like this forever? Admiral Hamilton's face was about to become grim due to excessive anger. Your Excellency, Commander, we have no other choice but to wait. No matter how slow the Germans are, they will definitely advance to Canterbury. The longer the delay, the more disadvantageous they will be. It is already the end of August and 3 more months. The cold winter is coming. At that time, it will be even more difficult for the Germans to supply supplies. Admiral Haig explained. General Hamilton was stunned for a moment, then nodded. Okay, that's it. Order our troops to take cover and suffer as little loss as possible. I'd like to see how long the Germans can hold off. Yes, Your Excellency Commander. Admiral Haig and others replied. Your Excellency, Commander, if possible, I hope that the Air Force can compete with the Germans for air supremacy. The losses caused by the German airstrikes are even greater than the losses caused by their naval guns. If the Germans can be stopped airstrikes, our losses can be reduced. Admiral Haig suggested. I will contact the Air Force. Hamilton nodded. This is something he has been paying attention to. However, it doesn't seem to be going well. Chapter 785. Royal Air Force. Airplanes. We need airplanes to contain the powerful air power of the Germans. Otherwise, we will have no way to persist here. The daily airstrikes of the Germans will bring us unimaginable losses. Admiral Hamilton was angry roared. Although, Churchill had promised him that the Air Force would fully support the army in the Canterbury battle. However, the fighting has already started for 3 days. The Air Force's plane didn't even see a shadow. On the contrary, the British Army suffered heavy losses in the daily airstrikes of the German army. If this continues, I'm afraid it won't be long before the morale of the troops will drop directly to the bottom. At that time, how can we fight the Germans? Your Excellency, the Air Force guys are not afraid, right? They lost a lot in the air battles with the Germans in France before. The combat effectiveness of the German planes is very terrifying. Admiral Haig said. No matter what, the Air Force must take off to fight the Germans. If we are constantly strafed and bombed by the Germans like this, we will have no way to fight this battle. Admiral Hamilton said with a dark face. The guns of the battleships of the German Navy have put them under tremendous pressure. The planes of the German Army Air Force went back and forth 3 or 4 times a day, constantly dropping bombs on British Army positions or cities, further causing greater losses to the British Army. This made Admiral Hamilton almost furious. The other British generals had no choice but to say nothing more. The German army's advance speed is not fast every day, but their naval guns and aircraft are constantly causing losses to the British army. This is like watching the British army continue to bleed slowly after a knife was cut in the blood vessel of the British army. If this continues, I'm afraid that the Germans will not come to fight. They will all bleed to death by themselves. In this battle, the British army no longer had the slightest chance of winning. London, RAF Command. Due to the development of the war situation, the Royal Air Force was established a little earlier than in another time and space. The Chief of Air Staff is now fully responsible for all affairs of the Royal Air Force, and is responsible only to the Prime Minister. The current strength of the Royal Air Force is also stronger than that of another time and space. Fierce battles have resulted in a blowout development of science and technology. However, the German Army Air Force and Naval Air Force that the Royal Air Force needs to face now are much stronger than in another time and space. Your Excellency the Chief of Staff, Your Excellency the Prime Minister just called and asked us to immediately send planes to reinforce the battle in Canterbury. They are about to be tossed and collapsed by the German planes. A Major General reported to Admiral Trenchard. The army's idiots. They are equipped with so many anti-aircraft weapons. Are they all fancy but useless? Royal Air Force Chief of Staff General Trenchard said with some dissatisfaction. The continuous development of air power has also accelerated the replacement of air defense weapons. In order to fight against the powerful German air power, the British Army is also equipped with a lot of anti-aircraft machine guns and anti-aircraft guns. However, no matter how powerful the ground air defense weapons are, it is undoubtedly very difficult to strike air targets without precision-guided weapons. Who knows? The Major General shrugged helplessly. It seems that we can't escape. This is the third time the Prime Minister has asked us to go to war. If we don't express it again, I will be the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. Admiral Trenchard was quite a bit have no choice. When the British mainland was attacked, it was not that he wanted to be a turtle, but that the Royal Navy seemed too weak compared to the powerful German air power. The fighter jets they used before have proved to be no match for German fighter jets at all. Now their latest fighter is the Camel fighter that has just been mass produced. The maximum speed of this fighter can reach 187 km per hour, which is only a little slower than the F-2 fighter equipped by the German Army Air Force. In terms of other performance, although it is also a bit worse. But anyway, if they match up again, they won't be shot down without even being able to fight back. It's just that the number of advanced Camel fighter jets is very limited, and the entire Royal Air Force is only equipped with more than 200 fighters. The monthly output is only 100 or so. Admiral Trenchard regarded these precious planes as treasures. Subject to the blockade of the German Navy, the domestic resources of the United Kingdom are no longer able to support the development of military industry. Although they organized a lot of merchant ships and transport ships to transport supplies from North America to the UK. However, under the blockade of the German Navy, it is difficult for these merchant ships and transport ships to reach the British mainland, and 9 out of 10 will be sunk or captured by the German Navy. It can be said that it is completely delivering food to the Germans. However, the British government is unwilling to give up this transportation route, because in this case, they can get some supplies anyway. If you give up, you really won't get any supplies. The only thing the British government can do is to wait for all their transport ships and merchant ships to be lost. In that case, there is no way, Your Excellency, Chief of Staff, but our strength is too weak. If we take the risk to fight the Germans, our planes will be lost soon. By then, the skies of the British mainland will be completely reduced to nothing. In the territory of the Germans, there are no more Royal Air Force planes. The Major General sighed. There's no way around it. If we don't move out, the guys in the army will soon be unable to hold on. At that time, maybe they will blame us for the failure. At that time, I really will become a scapegoat, and I can't tell the pain. Admiral Trenchard's face was full of helplessness. Your Excellency Chief of Staff, our Camel fighters are no worse than the Germans. It's just that the number is too small. Wait a few more months, we will add a few hundred more fighters, and we will have enough strength to compete with Germany. People have resisted. At that time, maybe we can defeat the Germans in the British sky, and protect our sky. The Major General persuaded. Admiral Trenchard shook his head. The Germans will not give us so much time. After a few months, the army may have been defeated. By then, the entire British Isles will be under the control of the Germans. Will the RAF continue to exist? That's clearly impossible. Admiral Trenchard is obviously not very optimistic about the next battle situation. Chapter 786, Convoy. The outskirts of Calais, the airfield of the German Army Air Force. The 3rd Fighter Wing and the 4th Bomber Wing of the German Army Air Force are stationed here. The 3rd Fighter Wing is equipped with 120 F-2 fighters, while the 4th Bomber Wing is equipped with H-1 bombers. Although, compared with the beautiful and powerful fighters and bombers of later generations, these F-2 fighters and H-1 bombers equipped by the German Army Air Force are undoubtedly like ugly ducklings. However, it has to be admitted that they are already the most powerful fighters and bombers of this era. At least, Germany's opponents all hope to be equipped with a similar aircraft, so that they can withstand the air battle with the German army. Of course, the more advanced aircraft being developed in Germany are more powerful than the F-2 fighter jets and H-1 bombers. It's just that the technology is not yet mature, so there is no mass production yet. When the next batch of advanced aircraft is mass produced, the air power of the German army will be improved again, leaving other countries far behind. At the airport, busy, ground crews are fueling and reloading fighter jets and bombers about to take off. The pilots are taking the time to eat breakfast and listen to the combat briefing. These pilots go out every day to bomb the ground targets of the British Army, which has become their daily routine. Boss, we have launched a large-scale bombing of the British positions for 3 consecutive days. The British have also caused a lot of casualties. But why didn't a single British plane show up? Every day we can only. It's too boring to bully the anti-aircraft weapons hiding on the ground. A young pilot complained. The British's planes are all acting like turtles in the rear, and they dare not fight at all. No, I believe that they will definitely fight in a short time. If this continues, we will soon cover the infantry and fight to Canterbury. At that time, can the British plane still hide behind it? A small team leader said. Okay, stop talking nonsense. Everyone get on the plane and cover the 41st Battalion to attack the British target. The captain of the 31st Fighter Battalion ordered. The designation of the German Army Air Force, the odd number is a fighter, such as the 3rd Fighter Wing, and the double number is a bomber wing, such as the 4th Bomber Wing. Each wing has 3 brigades, and under the brigades there are squadrons and squadrons. Each team has a total of 4 aircraft, divided into 2 aircraft formations, with a lead aircraft and a wingman. 3 squadrons form a squadron with a total of 12 aircraft. 3 squadrons plus 4 spare aircraft form a brigade, with a total of 40 aircraft. And the 3 brigades form a wing, with a total of 120 aircraft. As for the air force above the wing, it has not yet been established. It is estimated that it will not be established until after the establishment of the Imperial Air Force. Yes, sir. The pilots all replied, and then with the help of the ground crew, they got into their respective planes. 15 minutes later, 36 F-2 fighter jets of the 31st Fighter Group took off from the airport and flew to the west of the Dover Strait to **** the accompanying 36 H-1 bombers of the 41st Bomber Group. The task of the fighters of the 31st Fighter Group is to protect the safety of these bombers. Threats come not only from the sky, but also from the ground. Although the aircraft of the British Air Force has not appeared for a long time, they dare not take it lightly. Although the performance of the fighter jets of the British Air Force is far inferior to the F-2 fighter jets of the Luftwaffe, the heavy bombers are still vulnerable to these aircraft and will be shot down easily. The threat on the ground is mainly the anti-aircraft weapons equipped by the British Army. Once these anti-aircraft weapons are found, fighter jets need to straf them, or even bomb them with small bombs hanging under the wings. Only after these obstacles are cleared can the bombers drop bombs without threat. The narrow Strait of Dover was flown across in just 10 minutes. When the plane flew over the British mainland, the pilots became nervous. This is fighting in the enemy's airspace. Once it is shot down, it will fall into the enemy's control area even if it parachutes. Once caught, a fool can guess what the consequences will be. Those angry British will inevitably tear them to pieces. Fortunately, there was no danger along the way, and it was not intercepted by the British Air Force, and it had already flown over the target. Get ready to drop the bomb. The captain of the 41st Bomber Group ordered. With the advancement of radio technology, the aircraft equipped by the frontline troops of the German Army Air Corps have been equipped with radio communication devices one after another, so that the commander's order can be smoothly conveyed to each aircraft. This alone puts the German Army Air Force ahead of the rest of the world. More than 30 H-1 bombers began to lower their altitude and prepare to drop bombs. The target they are going to bomb this time is the position of a British infantry division southwest of Canterbury. Before, the battleships of the German Navy had already bombarded this area fiercely. Most of the British fortifications have been destroyed. Sending the Army Air Corps over is nothing more than destroying those who slipped through the net. On the ground, tongues of flame suddenly sprang up. This is the British Army's anti-aircraft machine guns firing. Pull up. Pull up quickly. The captain of the 41st Fighter Battalion shouted loudly. The body structure of the H-1 bomber is very fragile, with only a thin layer of armor on key parts. These armors can't even withstand the bullets fired by anti-aircraft machine guns. The bullets fired by the anti-aircraft machine gun of the British Army hit the body of the H-1 bomber and penetrated directly. The wing of an H-1 bomber was broken, and the plane lost its balance and fell directly to the ground. The aviation fuel and bombs carried on the plane exploded. Boom. A violent explosion sounded, and the downed H-1 bomber had become a burning fireball. Under the sneak attack of the British anti-aircraft machine guns, 3 German H-1 bombers were shot down. The other bombers pulled up one after another and flew to high altitude, only to escape the catastrophe. But quite a few planes were damaged and had to hastily drop their bombs and flee. Damn. Number 1 Squadron, wipe out the anti-aircraft firepower of the British on the ground. The captain of the 31st Combat Brigade also felt his face was burning. This kind of cover mission has been carried out many times before, but there has never been such a mistake. Now, it has lost 3 bombers, which is undoubtedly a shame. 12 F-2 fighter jets rushed to the ground immediately, ready to teach the British air defense troops a lesson. Chapter 787, Air Combat. Who? A German F-2 fighter jet passed an anti-aircraft machine gun position of the British Army, and the small bombs hanging under the wings had already been dropped. Boom. Boom. The bomb exploded beside the anti-aircraft machine gun position, not only destroying the 2 anti-aircraft machine guns, but also tearing the machine gunners to pieces. The anti-aircraft machine guns of the British Army also began to fire crazily, and the bullets chased the German fighter planes in the sky. However, because the speed is too fast, the bullets of these anti-aircraft machine guns are difficult to hit. The German fighter jets also began to use aviation machine guns to shoot at the anti-aircraft machine gun positions of the British Army, causing more casualties to the British Army. Very good, kill these British. How dare they ambush us? The captain of the 31st Fighter Brigade of the German Army Air Corps looked angry. The ambush by the British just now caused them to lose several planes, and they were expensive bombers, which already made him not know how to go back and explain. Although the British air defense troops are very brave and hard-working, ground targets are already at a disadvantage in the face of air threats. So much so that they suffered extremely heavy losses under the strafing of German planes. However, the 31st Brigade of the German Army Air Corps will not be happy for long. In the clouds not far from them, dozens of British Camel fighter jets were rapidly approaching them under the cover of the clouds. God bless. The Germans have been attracted by the anti-aircraft fire on the ground and have not found us. This is our chance. Lieutenant Colonel Henry, the officer in charge of commanding these British Camel fighter jets, had a smile on his face. As an old pilot who fought against the German Army Air Force many times on the French battlefield, Lieutenant Colonel Henry knew the horror of these German fighter planes well. The German army is not only leading in fighter performance, even the Camel fighter is slightly inferior to the F-2 fighter. In terms of pilots' personal abilities and combat skills, the German army also has an advantage. The pilots of the German army have often experienced many air battles on the French battlefield, while most of the pilots of the Royal Air Force are rookies. Comparing the two, the gap is naturally reflected. Once an air battle breaks out between the two sides, it is conceivable what the final result will be. So, the Royal Air Force took great pains to deal with the German Army Air Force. A trap was specially set up to ambush the German Army Air Corps in order to narrow the gap in strength between the two sides. launch an attack, and kill those German planes. Lieutenant Colonel Henry immediately fired a flare with a flare gun. British aircraft are not equipped with radio communication devices like the Germans, which makes their command still rely on signal flares. Fortunately, the command to attack is very simple, and every pilot can easily understand it. Dozens of Camel fighter jets rushed out of the clouds and rushed towards the German fleet. Aviation machine guns began to fire, and dense bullets were fired at the German fleet. The first to be hit were those H-1 bombers. Many H-1 bombers did not leave after raising their altitude and eliminating the threat of ground air defense weapons, but were waiting for orders. But after the fighter force has cleared the ground of the threat, they will continue to attack. However, now they are in a predicament. The bullets from the aviation machine gun easily pierced through the body of the H-1 bomber, making large holes in the body. After the pilot inside was shot, he could no longer control the plane, causing the plane to fall straight to the ground. Although the H-1 bomber is larger and stronger than the fighter. However, under the sudden attack of British fighter jets, these heavy bombers could not evade at all, and one after another was shot down. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. British fighter. Got. I'm hit. I'm falling. Drop the bomb and return immediately. Fighters come and cover us. Drive out the British fighters. The entire bomber formation is in chaos. The pilots of those bombers probably encountered such a situation for the first time, and they didn't know how to deal with it. Even the bombers have machine guns for self-defense, but they can't show their strength at all. Arsehole. We were unexpectedly attacked by the British. The captain of the 31st Fighter Brigade of the German Army Air Corps couldn't believe the result at all. Cursing, he ordered his fighters to rescue the bombers. The F-2 fighter jets of the German army began to climb, preparing to engage the Royal Air Force. However, at this moment, the Royal Air Force has an altitude advantage, and it is undoubtedly very difficult for the German Army Air Force to launch a counterattack against the Royal Air Force. In terms of air combat tactics, the Royal Air Force also trained according to the tactics of the German army. This makes their tactics very similar. Multiple Camel fighter jets took advantage of their altitude and began to dive, inserting the German F-2 fighter jets into the scope. The aviation machine guns of the Camel fighter jets fired, and dense aerial bomb shot at the German F-2 fighter jets. The nose of an F-2 fighter jet was hit, causing damage to the engine, and it fell to the ground dragging thick smoke. Although the pilot parachuted in time, it was obviously not going to end well after falling into the hands of the British. Another F-2 fighter jet, the pilot was directly shot. The plane lost control, fell to the ground, and exploded into a ball of fire. There is also an F-2 fighter jet. The wing was broken in two. The plane lost its balance and fell to the ground. It can be said that during this fight, the German Army Air Force suffered extremely heavy losses under the sudden attack of the Royal Air Force. Fighters were shot down one after another, especially those H-1 bombers. The losses were very large. The fighter pilots of the German Army Air Corps finally calmed down after the initial panic and began to use the performance advantages of the F-2 fighter jets to fight with the Royal Air Force. Aviation machine guns fired continuously, bullets chasing fighter planes flying in the air. The pilots of both sides fought fiercely in the sky. Not only the German aircraft were shot down, but also the Camel fighter jets of the British Royal Air Force. The combat effectiveness of the German pilots gradually came into play, and they began to deal a heavy blow to the Royal Air Force. However, because the initial losses were too great and the bullets of the aviation machine guns were consumed too much, the air battle did not last long before it ended. Chapter 788, Air Supremacy. General, our air raid today is very difficult. The 4 waves of fleets dispatched were all ambushed by the British Royal Air Force. So far, we have lost 28 fighter jets and 37 bombers frame. A Major General reported to Lieutenant General Eckert. The sudden counterattack launched by the Royal Air Force caught the German Army Air Force by surprise. Lieutenant General Eckert frowned tightly, and the British would launch a counterattack at this time, which was completely beyond his expectations. After all, in the previous actions, the British kept silent and did not intend to fight back. Now, in just half a day, they have lost more than half of the air wing. Such a loss is undoubtedly unbearable for the German Army Air Force. What are the British doing? Don't they think they can confront us and want to compete with us for air supremacy? Lieutenant General Eckert said. Indeed, the strange behavior of the British surprised him very much. General, perhaps our previous bombing of the British Army caused heavy losses to the British. Therefore, the British Air Force can't sit still. Another general said. Lieutenant General Eckert nodded and indeed did not rule out this possibility. However, regardless of whether the British Air Force participates in combat or not, their intended combat objectives will not change in any way. Everyone, since the British want to compete with us for air supremacy, let's fight for air supremacy with them. The Army's attack on Canterbury will soon begin. We must ensure that the mastery of air supremacy in this piece of sky. Lieutenant General Eckert said. Although, the Army Air Corps will soon become an independent service. However, at least at this stage they are still subordinate to the Army. For the requirements of the Army Air Force must fully support it. Otherwise, if there is a problem with the battle against Britain this time, the consequences will be unbearable to anyone. Maybe even Lieutenant General Eckert, the new military commander who is about to become the commander of the Air Force, can't afford it. Therefore, everyone attaches great importance to this battle. Yes, General. Everyone replied. Everyone is very clear that this battle is directly related to their personal fate. If the Army Air Corps performed well in this battle, they would all be promoted once the Air Force was established. If the performance is not good enough, then any accident may happen. General, according to the reports of the pilots, the British Air Force is equipped with a new type of fighter. The performance is very good, although it is slightly inferior to our F-2 fighter. But overall, it is still a very good fighter. In air combat, many fighter jets were shot down by this type of British fighter jets. The leader of the 3rd Fighter Wing reported. A new type of fighter jet. No wonder the British don't want to be a coward. It turns out that they are equipped with a new type of fighter jet, so they think they can fight us? Lieutenant General Eckert sneered. With the strong support of Qin Tian, Germany's aviation manufacturing industry has always been ahead of the world. This allowed German pilots to fly the most advanced aircraft and ravaged pilots from other countries after the war broke out. However, other countries are catching up. But overall, there is still a big gap compared with Germany's advanced aircraft. General, even if the British are equipped with new fighter jets, they cannot be our opponents. After all, our F-2 fighter jets still have a lot of advantages. In addition, the quality of our pilots is far stronger than that of the British. The reason for the heavy losses this time is that they were ambushed by the British. In the case of a sudden attack, our pilots were caught off guard. Otherwise, the British would never have occupied much cheap, said the captain of the 4th Bomber Wing. Lieutenant General Eckert nodded. He is also very confident in the combat effectiveness of the Army Air Force. I know that this failure was nothing more than an accident. However, it also reflected a lot of problems. Why are our pilots so careless? This is something that shouldn't happen on the battlefield. Lieutenant General Eckert said. The other generals of the German Army Air Force were a little embarrassed. As Germany continued to gain victories in the war, the pilots of the Army Air Corps gradually developed a feeling of pride and complacency, as if they were number one in the world. General, we will urge the officers and soldiers below to prevent them from making such mistakes again. Lieutenant General Eckert did not intend to continue to pursue this point, so he did not hold on to it. Everyone knows that His Majesty the Emperor has always attached great importance to the aviation team. Therefore, I think he should know that we have failed this time. If we can't quickly turn the tide of the battle and win, it will cause harm to His Majesty the Emperor. Everyone must be very clear about the bad impression. Lieutenant General Eckert continued. Suddenly, everyone's heart tightened. Although the Emperor of the Empire has just succeeded to the throne, his prestige in the country and the army is very high, and almost no one will oppose him. Once he has a bad impression of the aviation team, the consequences can be imagined. At that time, I'm afraid that everyone's future will be affected. Seeing everyone's expressions, Lieutenant General Eckert knew that his goal of standing up had been achieved. He was transferred from the army to the Army Air Force, which made the generals of the Army Air Force feel somewhat conflicted. In order to ensure the victory of the war, although the generals of these Army Air Forces will not trip him up, however, there will be certain problems. It is undoubtedly a good thing to be able to use this incident to beat these guys. Everyone, how can we gain air supremacy on the battlefield? Do you have any suggestions for this? Lieutenant General Eckert asked. General, for now, there is only one way for us to gain air supremacy, and that is to destroy the British Air Force. Especially those advanced fighter jets of the British Air Force must be completely wiped out. After that, the British will no longer be able to compete with us in the sky. We have competed. The air supremacy of the British Isles will also belong to us, said the captain of the 3rd Fighter Wing. Lieutenant General Eckert nodded, and he thought so too. However, how to implement it will require further discussion. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 789, The Plan of the Air Force. General, there are only 2 ways to eliminate the advanced fighter jets of the British Air Force. The first way is to continue to attack and engage in air battles with the British. Through one after another air battle, all the British fighter planes will be eliminated. The second method is to directly bomb the British airport and destroy all their fighter planes on the airport. The captain of the 4th Bomber Wing suggested. The first method is time consuming and labor intensive, and our losses will not be small. In this case, it is very uneconomical. If the second method can be successful, then we can get it worked, said Lieutenant General Eckert. Personally, he is more inclined to the second method. However, the implementation of the second method is also quite difficult. First of all, if you want to bomb the airports of the British Air Force, you must first find these airports. At the same time, it must be confirmed which airports are stationed with fighter jets of the British Air Force, and which airports are only backup airports. Secondly, the defense of these airports by the British Air Force must also be very strict. There will be dense anti-aircraft weapons all around. Once the Luftwaffe launches an attack, it must be prepared to be shot down by these anti-aircraft weapons. In the end, the British are not immune to this. Once the German planes enter the sky over the British mainland, they may be discovered by the British. At that time, they will have to face the British Air Force in full swing. General, regarding the location of the British airport, we can ask the intelligence department for help. Our intelligence personnel in the UK will definitely be able to obtain relevant information, a general suggested. Lieutenant General Eckert nodded. The German intelligence agency also showed its talents in this world war. Now Britain, although it continues to resist, but there are still many British people who are very pessimistic about the outcome of the resistance. This makes them see no hope for the future of Britain. Once these people are lured by German intelligence personnel, they will easily betray the interests of the country. This made Germany well aware of a lot of British intelligence. Second question, we can choose to launch a surprise attack in the early morning or at dusk. However, in order to ensure that our bombing planes can return home smoothly, it is more appropriate to launch an attack in the early morning. Based on the current weather conditions, 5 o'clock in the morning the fighter plane can take off before it arrives. It is only after 6 o'clock, when it flies over the battlefield. It is difficult for the British to be prepared. If you are lucky, it is completely impossible to blow up the British fighter plane at the airport. No problem, said the captain of the 4th Bomber Wing. Blowing up the enemy's fighter planes at the airport is undoubtedly the best way to defeat the enemy's air power. If it can be successful in this way, it will be very beneficial for the German Army Air Force to gain air supremacy. General, as for the last problem, I think it is very easy to solve. Although, the British are equipped with some new fighter jets. However, I don't think they will have too many new fighter jets. Otherwise, they will not wait until the attack is only now being launched. As long as we send enough fighters for the bombers, we will be able to deal with them. With our fighter pilots already cautious, if the British Air Force wants to launch a surprise attack on us again, it is almost impossible. It's impossible, said the captain of the 3rd Fighter Wing. Lieutenant General Eckert thought about it, and it was indeed the case. Compared with the British Air Force, the German Army Air Force is much stronger. They don't need to be so cautious at all. They just need to launch an attack according to the predetermined plan. If the British Air Force dared to send fighter planes to intercept them, they would simply shoot down their fighter planes. Then, the only thing we need to worry about is whether the British have the courage to fight us. If they choose to escape, then our attack will be greatly reduced. Lieutenant General Eckert said. General, that's alright. If the British escape early, then we will bomb their airfields and destroy their airfields. Without the airfields, the British will no longer be able to influence the frontline fighting. Even if it will take time to quickly repair the airport. At worst, we will blow it up once they repair it. I think, after a few times, the army should have won the Battle of Canterbury. Well, very good. This is a good idea. Then, everyone, go down and prepare immediately. Tomorrow morning, launch an attack. Try to defeat the Air Force in one fell swoop and seize the air supremacy over the British Isles. Lieutenant General Eckert said. Yes, General. Everyone replied. Lieutenant General Eckert hopes that the attack tomorrow morning will solve the problem in one fell swoop. No matter how bad it is also necessary to ensure that air supremacy is in their hands during the Battle of Canterbury. The German Army Air Corps moved very quickly. After the order was issued, a combat plan was submitted in less than 2 hours. After the review, Lieutenant General Eckert felt that there was no problem, and then rushed to the British Combat Command in person to report to Marshal von Falkenhayn. Marshal von Falkenhayn also expressed support for the Army Air Corps plan. Fighting in places far away from the coast, the air support of the Army Air Force has become an increasingly indispensable and important fire support for the Army in combat. Therefore, he certainly hoped that the Army Air Force's plan would succeed and win air supremacy in one fell swoop. At 4 o'clock in the morning on August 30th, the various airports of the German Army Air Force on the front line were brightly lit. The ground crew was busy early on because the number of planes dispatched this time was very large. So, they need to be ready for these planes in advance. Tanker trucks run wildly at the airport, refueling every plane. The ammunition truck was also very busy, stuffing bullets and bombs from aviation machine guns into fighter planes. Pilots, eating breakfast and listening to operational briefings. They will soon have to fly the plane and participate in this operation. Are you ready? Lieutenant General Eckert asked. General, all the ministries involved in this offensive have completed their preparations. A Major General reported to Lieutenant General Eckert. Lieutenant General Eckert looked at the watch in his hand. It was only 4:30 in the morning. The sky is not yet bright, but there is not much time until dawn. Take off the fighter in half an hour. Lieutenant General Eckert gave the order. At 5 o'clock in the morning, the fighter planes of the German Army Air Forces began to take off from various airports. Chapter 790. I have to fight. Who? The plane taxied on the long runway and then rushed into the sky. After a slight formation over the airport, immediately head west. Although the sky is not yet bright at the moment, it will not have much impact on the flight. Besides, as time goes by, the sky will get brighter and brighter. For this operation, the German Army Air Force has dispatched all the main forces. All 4 fighter wings and 4 bomber wings participated in this operation. In addition, in order to strengthen the defense, a fighter wing and a bomber wing were drawn from other places as reserves. The number of fighters invested has reached thousands. According to information obtained from intelligence agencies, the airports of the British Air Force are mainly located in and around London. At present, the main combat aircraft of the British Air Force are distributed in 4 airports, with about 200 aircraft. This is undoubtedly good news for the German Army Air Force. The British Air Force has a small number of new fighters, so the threat to the German Army Air Force is not very great. The German Army Air Force can directly consume the British Air Force with the number of fighters. According to the task assignment, each fighter wing and a bomber wing are responsible for attacking a British Air Force airport. If you are lucky and can destroy the British Air Force's fighter planes on the airport, that would be the best. If it is not successful, the airport will also be destroyed, making it impossible for the British Air Force to use these airports in a short time. The huge fleet flew over the Strait of Dover and flew towards the intended target. Although it is still morning, the sky is not too bright. But in order to avoid being discovered by the British, all the planes stayed at high altitude. However, with so many planes operating together, the noise produced by the engines is still quite astonishing. If you are not careful, you may be discovered by the British on the ground. The Luftwaffe can only pray now that the British will not react so quickly. Otherwise, the effect of their bombing this time will be greatly reduced. From the coast of Calais to London, at the speed of the aircraft of the German Army Air Forces, it only takes an hour. In other words, at 6 o'clock in the morning, the bombing of the German Army Air Force could begin. In this era, there is no radar. Therefore, the early warning of airstrikes can only rely on manpower. Rely on the eyes and ears of the observer to search for the target. Once the target is found, report to the airport quickly. In order to guard against the German sneak attack, the British Air Force also made special preparations. They sent a large number of scouts to the coastal areas. These scouts carry telegraphs, and if a threat is detected, it will be reported immediately. At 5:40 in the morning, the investigators of the British Air Force based in Canterbury heard a buzzing sound in the sky, as if wild bees were flying. However, when they looked up to the sky, they found nothing. Enemy attack. The scouts of the British Air Force immediately sounded the alarm. They thought it was an air attack by the Luftwaffe on Canterbury. But then they discovered that no bombs were dropped at all. Obviously, the German planes were not directed at Canterbury at all. Damn, what do the Germans want? Boss, their plane seems to be headed northwest. Northwest direction? That's London. Damn, the Germans don't want to bomb London. No, we have to report immediately and let London get ready. Perhaps the Germans want to launch an attack on our airport. Yesterday our pilots caused the Germans to pay a lot of losses. Regardless of whether the German planes want to bomb London or want to attack the airfield of the Luftwaffe, this is a big deal for the British Air Force. They immediately reported the news to their superiors. The Royal Air Force Staff, Chief of Staff Admiral Trenchard has not gotten up yet. However, his adjutant pushed open his bedroom door roughly. What happened? Admiral Trenchard turned over from the bed. General, the front reports that a large number of German planes are flying towards London. Their target is most likely London or our airport. The adjutant reported. What? Admiral Trenchard looked shocked. Although, the performance of the Royal Air Force yesterday made him very satisfied. He also expected that the Germans would obviously not sit idly by. But I didn't expect that the German counterattack would come so quickly. Immediately order our fighters to take off and prepare to meet the Germans. The Air Defense Force is also on emergency combat readiness, Admiral Trenchard ordered. General, the Germans are aggressive and have dispatched a large number of fighter planes. If we fight them head on, we may lose badly. Perhaps we can order our planes to shift to preserve our strength, the adjutant suggested. Admiral Trenchard was taken aback for a moment, but then shook his head. Although, Admiral Trenchard was taken aback for a moment, but then shook his head. Trenchard knows that preserving strength is the best way. Only in this way can the Royal Air Force have enough strength to continue fighting with the German Army Air Force. However, if London is attacked by the Germans, and the RAF avoids fighting, it will undoubtedly have extremely bad effects. At that time, the leaders of the Royal Air Force will be dealt with. Order the troops to prepare for battle. We cannot retreat at this time, and it is impossible to retreat, Admiral Trenchard said. Yes, General. The adjutant also understood what Admiral Trenchard was worried about. He also knew that Admiral Trenchard had no choice but to issue such an order. Woo. Stern sirens sounded over the airports around London, and the pilots quickly rushed to their planes. At the same time, the ground crew also began to fill up fuel and ammunition for other aircraft that were not ready, trying to make them ready for takeoff in the shortest possible time. The four main airports where the main fighter jets of the Royal Air Force are located. Each airport has 12 Camel fighter jets on standby 24 hours a day. Therefore, after the takeoff order is issued, these aircraft can take off as soon as possible. However, other aircraft need to be prepared. And this all takes time. Please take off. Please take off. A Camel fighter that was ready started the engine with the help of the ground crew. The propeller rotated rapidly, and the strong power brought the fighter plane to slide on the runway, and then the nose was pulled upwards, rushing into the sky. Chapter 791. Bombing. There are still 15 minutes to reach the target. The fighter unit is ready. The commander of the 1st Fighter Wing ordered. In order to ensure the smooth operation of this operation, the captains of the several alliances went into battle in person. Understood, Your Excellency, Captain. The 3 fighter captains replied. The first fighter group, stay at high altitude, protect the bomber wing. The second fighter wing is responsible for clearing the anti-aircraft fire on the ground. The third fighter group, prepare to deal with the British fighters. This time, we want to avenge our shame, kill them all. Yes, General. All the pilots replied. Deducting losses, the first fighter wing dispatched as many as 94 fighters this time, and as long as they did not encounter all the main forces of the British Air Force, they could all deal with it. Besides, there are 3 other fighter wings operating together. If it doesn't work, you can call them for help. This made the German Army Air Corps full of confidence in this operation. They firmly believe that there will be no problem at all in defeating the British Air Force when their own side deploys such a powerful force. Seen as a fighter pilot of the Royal Air Force, in yesterday's battle, he drove a Camel fighter jet and shot down an H-1 bomber and an F-2 fighter jet of the German Army Air Force. Today, after the battle siren sounded, he was the first to fly the plane into the air again. In order to defend their country, these pilots also tried their best. However, when Qin and his comrades flew into the sky and spotted the incoming enemy plane, their faces changed drastically. God, did the Germans dispatch so many planes? How can we resist? Qin couldn't help but exclaimed. They have only taken off a total of 12 Camel fighter jets now. The rest of the fighters are still preparing for takeoff. And what they have to face now is hundreds of German F-2 fighter jets. With such a huge disparity in strength, it is almost impossible to win. Even though the enemy is very powerful, Qin is not timid. He shakes the wings, signaling to his wingman. Then he led his wingman and rushed to the German fleet. It is undoubtedly very difficult to communicate with your comrades without installing a radio communication device. This puts the British Air Force at a complete disadvantage in combat. Other fighter jets of the British Air Force also bravely rushed towards the German fleet. HMPH. I don't know whether these British are brave or stupid. With only a few planes, they dare to attack us. Number 1 Squadron, Number 2 Squadron, face the enemy head on. Number 3 Squadron, continue to climb and kill these British people. The captain of the 13th Fighter Battalion ordered. 32 F-2 fighter jets rushed towards Qin and his teammates immediately. Da. Aviation machine guns started firing. Even though it was early morning, the tracer bullets drew a bright trail in the sky. The fighter planes of both sides started a fierce exchange of fire. It's just that this time the British Air Force can no longer take advantage of it. They are not only at a disadvantage in terms of fighter performance, but also in the quality of pilots. In terms of the number of fighters, it is even at a disadvantage. Under such circumstances, how is it possible to expect them to win the German Army Air Force? Damn, I'm bitten, cover me, a German pilot shouted. The plane he was driving kept turning, trying to escape. However, it was discovered that the British pilot who bit him was also a very powerful person and kept biting him tightly. This forced him to call in reinforcement from his wingman. It was Qin who bit the German pilot. With his extraordinary skills, he successfully shot down a German fighter jet. However, the ensuing battle put him in a difficult situation. His wingman had been shot down just now, leaving him to fight alone. Da. A round of bullets passed in front of Qin's fighter plane, barely missing his plane. If hit, the fragile aircraft would surely be torn to shreds. Qin not only narrowly escaped the fatal attack, but also shot down the German plane he had been chasing. However, his good luck ended here. A German F-2 fighter seized the opportunity and hit the Camel fighter driven by Qin. The bullet hit the fighter's backup, knocking off a piece of the tail. The fighter jet plummeted into thick smoke and fell to the ground. Qin tried to escape by skydiving, but failed. Although, the pilots of the British Air Force are very heroic. However, in the attack of the German Army Air Force, which occupies an absolute advantage, the British pilots still inevitably failed in the end. The fighter that took off first was shot down after not holding on for long. And the follow-up fighters will be destroyed on the airport before they can take off. Da. Boom. The anti-aircraft weapons around the airport began to roar. The air defense soldiers of the British Air Force, manipulating those anti-aircraft machine guns and anti-aircraft guns, opened fire frantically, trying to shoot down the German aircraft. However, they were suppressed by German fighter jets. Dozens of fighter jets opened fire on these air defense firepower points. Whether it is bombing with small bombs mounted under the wings, or strafing with aviation machine guns, it has caused great casualties to the air defense forces of the British Air Force. An anti-aircraft machine gun was firing crazily, and the shell casings fell to the ground, making a crisp clanging sound. The dense bullets chased the German aircraft in the air, but it was difficult to hit the target. The speed of those planes was too fast, and they flew past before the air defense soldiers could react. Phew. A bomb fell and exploded next to this anti-aircraft machine gun. Amidst the violent explosion, the anti-aircraft machine gun was blown into parts. Several British anti-aircraft soldiers were also killed. An F-2 fighter jet was firing at an anti-aircraft gun emplacement of the British Army. The dense aviation machine gun bullets hit the anti-aircraft gun, shooting sparks one by one. At the same time, there was the sound of bullets hitting the human body, and the screams from the mouths of British air defense soldiers. Under the suppression of the German fighter force, the anti-aircraft firepower around the airport was quickly suppressed. The bomber, which had been on standby at high altitude, also received an order to attack at this time. One after another, the H-1 bombers began to lower their altitude and opened the cabin at a height of only 1,000 meters above the ground. One after another, the aerial bombs fell from the belly of the aircraft and hit the airport of the British Air Force in freefall. Chapter 792, Destroy. On the runway of the airport, one after another British Air Force planes are preparing for takeoff. The pilot had already sat in the cockpit of the plane and took off immediately after the ground crew finished the final preparations. Hurry up. Go faster. Jack, the Germans have too many planes, and we are about to fail. A pilot shouted at the ground crew below. I'm already filling up the fuel at the fastest speed. But this asterisk tanker can only go so fast. What can I do? The ground crew named Jack said impatiently. Suddenly, a German F-2 fighter jet passed the turret, and a series of bullets from aviation machine guns shot over. Jack was shot in the chest immediately, and the whole person flew upside down. My God. The pilot shouted. He jumped off the plane in a hurry, preparing to escape. However, a bomb had fallen and hit his plane exactly. Boom. The bomb exploded and also detonated the refueling truck. The flames completely engulfed the pilot and his plane. Several H-1 bombers, flying over shells. Bombs fell from under the belly of the aircraft like dumplings, and then there was a dense explosion, and the entire runway head was enveloped in flames. The British fighter planes parked on the runway were all engulfed in flames. The huge hangar next to it was also the key target for German aircraft to destroy. With the air defense fire at the airport suppressed, several H-1 fighter jets threw a total of 3 tons of aerial bombs into the hangar. Although, there are not many aircraft left in the hangar. But it was still all destroyed. Immediately afterwards, the airport's ammunition depots, fuel depots, pilot dormitories, restaurants, and sentry towers all became the targets of German aircraft attacks. Under the bombing of German bombers, these targets were all destroyed. The German bombing lasted only 20 minutes. However, when the German army finished dropping the bombs and evacuated, the entire airport had become a mess and fragmented. It's over. This time it's really over. The person in charge of the airport looked at the devastated airport, wanting to cry but not crying. It will take a lot of time to build such an airport. Now, everything is over. In addition, the loss of those advanced fighter jets and pilots made it impossible for the British to be replenished in a short time. Fighters are okay. Although the production speed is a bit slower, they can always be replenished slowly. But pilots are different. The Royal Air Force already lacks enough pilots, especially experienced fighter pilots. Once the rookie takes off, it will only become a target for the Germans. British Royal Air Force Staff Headquarters, Admiral Trenchard stood in front of the window of his office. His face was gloomy, as if water could drip out. From his office, he could clearly see thick smoke billowing from the airport not far away. Damn it, the target of the Germans is really our airport. This time, the Royal Air Force must have suffered heavy losses. Now, what should we use to compete with the Germans for air supremacy? Admiral Trenchard kept asking himself. However, he didn't even know what to do. General Trenchard did not expect that the German attack would be so swift and decisive, directly attacking their airport. Even London, the capital of the British Empire, is there, but the Germans turn a blind eye to it. Although, bombing London will have a big impact on the morale of the British. However, it did not help much in itself to promote the development of the war situation. So, the Luftwaffe directly made the best choice. General, what should we do now? All 4 major airports were blown up by the Germans. Our fighter force was almost wiped out. Now, there are less than 20 intact planes. Most of them it was just produced from the factory. The loss of pilots is also very large, and the number of pilots who have experience in aerial combat is very small. A Royal Air Force general looked dazed and helpless. Originally, the strength of the Royal Air Force was very weak, and after this round of attacks by the German Army Air Force, it was almost destroyed. Order the troops to rescue the injured pilots as much as possible. The destroyed airport must also be repaired. Restore as much strength as possible. Admiral Trenchard said. Yes, General. The general nodded and went to make arrangements immediately. After the general left, Admiral Trenchard closed his eyes in pain. It was not easy for the Royal Air Force to accumulate such wealth. But now, it was lost all at once. Moreover, when the war is very unfavorable to Britain, it is impossible for them to regain their strength. This attack by the German Army Air Force has a very obvious effect. Several major airfields of the Royal Air Force were destroyed, more than 170 new fighter jets were lost, and countless pilots and ground crews were killed or injured. Although the Royal Air Force still has a batch of new fighter jets left, but because of the limited number, it is no longer enough to pose any threat to the German Army Air Force. In the ensuing battle, the Royal Air Force could no longer provide any support to the British Army. The German Army Air Force lost more than 40 aircraft in this round of attacks. Among them, the number of fighter jets reached nearly 30, while there were only a dozen bombers. Almost all of the lost fighters were shot down during air battles with British Air Force fighters, or when suppressing ground anti-aircraft fire. Although the losses accounted for a lot, the Royal Navy could be defeated in one go. This is still very cost-effective for these losses. Without the interference of the British Air Force, the German Army Air Force will be able to bomb the British Army with all its strength. Very good, very good. General Zeckert, you have done a great job. Marshal von Falkenhayn smiled after getting the final result. He is very satisfied with the results achieved by the German Army Air Force this time. Your Excellency, the British Air Force is too weak. With the Imperial Army Air Force fully dispatched, they simply cannot fight us. Lieutenant General Zeckert looked very humble. General Zeckert, don't we have to worry about the threat of the British Air Force next? Admiral Crook asked. After all, their attack on Canterbury is about to start. Although the British still have some aircraft left, there is nothing to worry about. The Army Air Corps will completely eliminate all threats. Lieutenant General Zeckert replied confidently. Chapter 793, Blitzplan. Prime Minister's Office, London, UK. Churchill sat behind his desk, frowning. In front of him sat Richard Haldane, Secretary of State for War, and General Trenchard, Chief of the Air Staff. When the German Army Air Force entered British airspace on a large scale, harsh air defense sirens sounded throughout London. Countless British people panicked and looked for shelter. Many people even just got up from the bed, and they didn't even have time to put on their clothes. There are even some women who are just wrapped in a sheet. Churchill, the Prime Minister, was also led by his secretary and guards to the air raid shelter. However, the Prime Minister's office has built a solid air raid shelter, so there is no need to rob the air raid shelter with other civilians. But in the end, the Luftwaffe did not launch an air raid on London, only destroyed those airports. Your Excellency, Chief of Staff, is the loss of the Royal Air Force large? After a while, Churchill asked. Your Excellency, after this battle, the Air Force's main combat power has been reduced by 90%. The remaining power is no longer enough to continue fighting, Admiral Trenchard said. Such a big loss? Churchill and Richard Haldane were taken aback. Obviously, the loss of the Air Force completely exceeded their expectations. Yes, Your Excellency. The Germans used nearly 1,000 aircraft of various types in this round of attacks. The strength they have shown has far surpassed that of the Royal Navy. Therefore, the Royal Air Force will fight back a little bit. None. Admiral Trenchard replied. When will the Royal Air Force recover its strength? Richard Haldane asked. The Southeast Theatre of the British Army is still waiting for support from the Royal Air Force. Without RAF reinforcement, they suffered mounting losses from the air raids of the German Army Air Corps. This will undoubtedly put them at a very disadvantageous position in the next battle. His Excellency, Minister of War, this is very difficult. It is even said that it is almost impossible. Admiral Trenchard said. What? You mean, the Royal Air Force can't recover its strength? Churchill frowned tightly. Yes, Your Excellency. After this battle, the Royal Air Force may no longer have the strength to continue fighting. Because our aircraft factory is subject to various factors, the number of aircraft produced every month is exactly fewer and fewer. Therefore, if the Royal Air Force wants to restore its strength, I don't know how long it will take. Admiral Trenchard has already felt deeply desperate for the future of the Royal Air Force. His Excellency, Minister of War, it seems that we are in trouble for the Battle of Canterbury this time. Churchill was a little frustrated. Your Excellency, we will try our best to win the Battle of Canterbury, Richard Haldane said. Churchill nodded and didn't say much. He also knew that the army would do its best to fight this battle. However, it is very difficult to say whether it can win. While the British were desperate for the heavy loss of the Royal Air Force, the German army was already actively preparing to take advantage of this opportunity to launch a large-scale offensive. The Army Air Force destroyed the British Air Force in one fell swoop during this morning's operation. In the next battle, the British skies will belong to us. All attacking troops will receive air support from the Army Air Force. Field Marshal von Falkenhayn addressed the generals of the German army. General Eckert, well done. Yes, General Eckert. In the next battle, the Army Air Force should provide us with more support. The other German generals said one after another. The current German army seems to have become accustomed to having aircraft support overhead when attacking. These planes can't bring them the latest enemy's movements, but they can also drop bombs on the enemy's head, or use machine guns to shoot the enemy, which makes the enemy miserable. With the support of aircraft, their losses in battle can also be effectively reduced. Okay, everyone. Now, the conditions for us to launch a fierce attack on the British army entrenched around Canterbury seem to be ripe. Then, don't waste any more time. His Majesty the Emperor hopes that we can end the war before Christmas. Marshal von Falkenhayn continued. Although the weather is still relatively hot, the further you go, the colder the weather will be. Especially the winter in Europe is simply not enough for troops to fight and march in the field. In that case, a large number of non-combat attrition due to severe cold is enough to cause the army to collapse. Therefore, the German army also hoped that the war would end before Christmas. Your Excellency Marshal, we are ready. All the main forces of the First Army have already landed. All the preparations for the attack have been made. We can launch an attack at any time. Kruck, Commander of the First Army, entered will say. Your Excellency Marshal, the Second Army Corps is also ready to attack. General Below, Commander of the Second Army Corps, said. Very well, then launch the attack according to the predetermined plan. This time, we must eliminate the main force of the British in the southeast of England. Marshal von Falkenhayn said. Yes, Your Excellency the Marshal. Everyone replied. They all knew that a big battle was about to kick off. According to the plan, the 1st Armored Division and the 2nd Armored Division, as the forerunners of the 1st Army and the 2nd Army, advanced towards Canterbury. After reaching Canterbury, they broke through the defense of the British Army, penetrated to the side of Canterbury, and divided the British Army. Surrounded. The infantry followed up in large numbers, and with the assistance of the armored forces, annihilated this part of the British Army. During this process, the 3rd Army launched an attack on Maidstone, pinning down the British 3rd Army and the 8th Army. The 8th Army will go into battle as appropriate, said Marshal von Falkenhayn. All the generals nodded again and again. This is a battle plan that has been drawn up long ago. Judging from the current actual situation, this plan is not outdated at all, and can still be used. Are the armored units ready? They are the key to this battle, Marshal von Falkenhayn emphasized. To quickly advance to Canterbury and then conduct interspersed siege, a strong assault force is essential. Only the armored forces can accomplish this goal. Your Excellency Marshal, all the tanks of the 1st Armored Division are ready to fight. The same goes for the 2nd Armored Division. Chapter 794, Armored Assault. In the early morning of August 31st, on the position of the German First Army, more than 300,000 people from the First Army have landed in Margate. In the past few days, they have also been pushing towards Canterbury, and the striker is even less than 5 kilometers away from Canterbury. On the artillery position, thousands of cannons of various calibers have been launched. These are the artillery equipped by the various infantry divisions under the First Army. There are still a large number of German Navy ships on the sea a little further away. There are not only new dreadnoughts equipped with 380mm main guns, but also pre-dreadnoughts equipped with old 280mm main guns. These warships will provide powerful fire support for the First Army in the upcoming battles. Break through the British defenses for the attacking German troops. On the forward position, more than 200 tanks of the 1st Armored Division of the German Army are waiting there quietly. Tank crews are having breakfast. After the order is issued, they will immediately launch an attack, destroying all the British defenses with a torrent of steel, clearing the way for the follow-up army. In the direction of Dover, the 2nd Army of the German Army is also fully prepared. More than 200 tanks of the 2nd Armored Division will also become the 5th unit of the 2nd Army this time. At 7:30 in the morning, the German shelling began. The two legions divided into two directions, assembled more than 2,000 cannons, and opened fire on the British fortifications. Although, the German naval guns and bombing had almost destroyed the British fortifications. However, every time the fortifications were destroyed, the British rushed to repair them overnight. Although the repaired fortifications will be greatly reduced in defense, but for infantry, it will still cause a lot of trouble. Therefore, before attacking, it is best to use powerful artillery fire to destroy those fortifications again, so as to be foolproof. Warships cruising at sea also joined in. Large caliber naval guns proclaimed their strength to the world. Every time a large caliber naval gun shell exploded on the ground, it would leave a huge crater, causing great casualties to the British. The fortifications painstakingly constructed by the British Army were bombed to pieces under the heavy shelling of the German Army. Got how many cannons the Germans have assembled? Are they going to launch a general offensive? Admiral Hamilton hid in his underground headquarters, listening to the dense explosions outside, with a very ugly face. Call General Haig and General Benson, and tell them to resist the German attack no matter what, Admiral Hamilton ordered. Although, the 1st Army and the 2nd Army are the elite of the British Army, but Admiral Hamilton was not at all sure whether they could complete the task. He hoped that the 1st Army and the 2nd Army could hold their positions while causing as many casualties as possible to the German Army. In this case, he can organize follow-up troops to launch a counterattack. If you are lucky, it is not impossible to defeat the German Army in one fell swoop. Yes, General. The staff officer immediately went to convey the order of Admiral Hamilton. At this moment, Admiral Haig and Admiral Benson are also struggling to adjust their deployment. Although the German offensive has not yet started, such a large-scale shelling indicates that the next offensive will definitely be very violent. They also worried that their troops would not be able to withstand the German attack. If that's the case, then there's a problem. The German shelling did not last long. Only half an hour later, the artillery fire began to extend to the depth of the British defense. Get into position and prepare to fight. The British commander on the front line is also experienced. After discovering that the German artillery fire began to extend to the rear, he knew that the German offensive was about to start, and he began to organize troops to enter the position. It's just that their defensive positions have been destroyed by the fierce German shelling. It is very difficult to say how effective it can be in battle. However, at least there is a place to hide, which is much better than being directly exposed. 1st Armored Division, attack. On the position of the German Army, the commander of the 1st Armored Division gave the order to attack. More than 200 tanks started their engines. These steel monsters, breathing black smoke, rushed out of the position roaring, and attacked the British Army's position. Following these steel monsters are the elite infantry of the German army. After the armored forces broke through the British defense line, they will further tear apart the British defense line and expand the results of the battle. Boom. The roar of the engines of more than 200 tanks, gathered together, is still very amazing. Least, after the British soldiers on the ground discovered these tanks, many people were frightened, and some even urinated. Got tanks. The Germans have dispatched a large number of tanks. We will become the focus of the German breakthrough. A British officer looked desperate. Report to the division commander, we need reinforcement and anti-tank weapons. The place where the German 1st Armored Division chose to assault was the position of the 22nd Brigade of the 8th Infantry Division of the British Army. Although, this infantry division is an elite infantry division of the British Army, but they also lack anti-tank weapons, and it is naturally difficult to resist the assault of an armored division of the German army. Bring up the anti-tank gun. The anti-tank soldiers on the front line pulled an anti-tank gun to the trench in a hurry. Fire. Boom. An armor-piercing projectile flew out of the gun and flew towards a German tank. When the armor-piercing projectile hit the armor of the tank, and the weak armor could not resist the armor-piercing projectile, so it was easily cut open. Fragments exploded inside the tank, killing the tank crew inside. Good job. A British officer shouted excitedly. Boom. A grenade fell beside the anti-tank artillery group, killing several anti-tank soldiers. Although, the British anti-tank guns began to destroy the German tanks. However, the Germans were also able to use tank guns to destroy the British anti-tank firepower. Without enough anti-tank weapons, the British army could not resist the German attack at all. What's more, the air fire support of the German Army Air Force has also arrived. An F-2 fighter jet fired at the trenches of the British Army with aviation machine guns, and many British soldiers were beaten into sieves. Several H-1 bombers dropped bombs on the British positions, and the bombs exploded, directly blowing up a section of the trench. The British soldiers stationed here suffered heavy losses. Chapter 795. I can't stop it. General, the 8th Infantry Division reported that they were attacked by German armored units. The frontline troops suffered heavy losses and were about to be overwhelmed. A staff officer reported to Admiral Haig. Armored troops? The expression on Admiral Haig's face became serious. On the French battlefield, he has seen how powerful the German armored forces are. Under the impact of those tanks, the solid defense line of the British and French allied forces would be easily broken through. Now, the German army has directly used armored forces to participate in the offensive, which undoubtedly means that the German army has moved for real. Let the 8th Infantry Division hold out for an hour no matter what. In addition, dispatch the 10th Infantry Division to immediately reinforce the 8th Infantry Division. Admiral Haig ordered. He knows very well that the strength of an infantry division of the British Army is simply impossible to withstand an armored division of the German Army. Even 2 infantry divisions are enough. Now he only hoped that the British infantry would hold on and give yes, General. The staff officer immediately went to send a telegram. Send a telegram to the theater command. We urgently need tank reinforcement. Request tank troops to fight against the Germans. Admiral Haig immediately issued an order. Yes, General. Immediately someone called the theater command. At the request of Admiral Hamilton, the tank force of the British Army sent more than half of its troops to Canterbury in order to deal with the powerful German armored forces. Although, the tanks equipped by the British Army are much inferior to those equipped by the German Army. But after improvement, the performance is pretty good. At least, the problem has been solved. Canterbury, British Continental Army Southeast Theatre Command. Admiral Hamilton frowned. The General, the 1st Army and the 2nd Army have already sent a telegram asking for help. They have been attacked by the German Army and need reinforcement urgently. In particular, the German Army has used more than 500 tanks on the 2 battlefields. The troops at the front were under extreme pressure, a Major General reported. Damn the Germans, have they invested in the main force from the beginning? Admiral Hamilton couldn't help cursing. The German Army Air Force has just solved the Royal Air Force, and now it has invested the main force to launch an offensive. Obviously, the Germans had already planned this attack for a long time. General, Admiral Haig and Major General Benson all hope that we can send tanks to fight. Otherwise, the front line of defense will soon be penetrated by the Germans. The Major General continued. Admiral Hamilton shook his head. If we have invested in tank troops from the beginning, what should we do when we counterattack? Tell General Haig and General Benson to let them stop the Germans with fortifications and anti-tank weapons as much as possible. And try to eliminate the German tanks as much as possible. Our tanks are not many, and we must save them for the most critical time, before they can be used. According to General Hamilton, now is not the time to use tanks. Before the German army landed on the British mainland, the United Kingdom used all its production capacity and only produced 1,000 tanks. This tank, similar to the French Renault tank, can be regarded as a joint development between Britain and France. It's just that France has surrendered now, so only the UK produces it. After evaluation, British military experts believe that the performance of the tank they produce named Hound Dog is equivalent to that of the tank equipped by the German army. However, the limited quantity and the lack of various materials have greatly restricted the follow-up production plan. Therefore, the generals of the British army can only save a little. If it is lost, it will be difficult to get it back. Therefore, Admiral Hamilton regarded these tanks as treasures. When Hamilton believed that tanks could be used, it was when the British army had consumed a large amount of the German army's active force and launched a counterattack. At that time, the powerful assault force of the tank can be fully displayed. The British army can seize such an opportunity to smash the last resistance of the German army in one fell swoop and win the battle. It's a pity that General Hamilton didn't seem to think that, if the British army could not withstand the German attack and lead to a complete defeat, he left the tank there like a baby, and it was useless. Yes, General. The Major General nodded, and then conveyed Admiral Hamilton's order to the front line. Arsehole. That guy Hamilton, does he want our soldiers to launch a suicide attack on the German tanks? Admiral Haig immediately cursed, after receiving Admiral Hamilton's reply. In Admiral Haig's view, such an order issued by Admiral Hamilton was simply a trap in his head. General, what should we do now? What else can we do? Since Hamilton wants us to fight to the end, that's the only way to go. Give the frontline troops an order to fight to the death. Admiral Haig ordered. Yes, General. A trace of despair flashed in the officer's eyes. He knew that after such an order was issued, the casualties of the troops on the front line would definitely be very heavy. However, after Admiral Hamilton, the commander, has already issued such an order, do they have other options? On the frontline battlefield, German tanks are rampaging. Although, the British anti-tank weapons destroyed some German tanks. However, for the steel torrent formed by the German army with a large number of tanks, such losses are nothing at all. The tracks of the tank overwhelmed the barbed wire fence in front of the British Army's position, and at the same time were crushed, as well as the bodies of those British soldiers. Da-da-da. A heavy machine gun of the British Army was firing crazily, and the dense bullets hit the armor of the tank, making a clanging sound. But, other than knocking some paint off, there's really no effect at all. Boom. The tank's 37mm tank gun fired, and a high explosive shell accurately hit the heavy machine gun, blowing the heavy machine gun apart. Some brave British soldiers rushed towards the German tanks with cluster grenades or explosives. However, what greeted them was the intensive firepower of the tanks. Many people were beaten into sieves before they rushed to the front of the tank. Only a very small number of people can succeed in blowing up the German tanks. When more and more tanks rushed to the welcoming position, the 8th Infantry Division and the 10th Infantry Division, which was later reinforced, could no longer resist. Countless British soldiers fled in embarrassment, causing the entire front to be defeated. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 796, Interspersed. Boom. A German No. 1 tank covered a squad of German infantry and attacked a position of the British Army. Although the British Army deployed one heavy machine gun and one light machine gun here, under the threat of tanks, this position still appears precarious. The tank gun accurately hit a machine gun bunker and destroyed it. The LMG was blown up, but the machine gunner had better luck and escaped to life. Sir, the German tanks are approaching. We can't resist and must retreat. Otherwise, we will all die here. A soldier shouted. No, I can't retreat. My order is to stick to this place. No one is allowed to retreat without the order to retreat. The officer shook his head firmly. Boom. A high explosive bomb fell into the trench. After the shell exploded, it immediately tore the British officer to pieces. At the same time, several British soldiers were killed. Got. The officer was killed by the Germans. Let's run away. The other British soldiers jumped out of the trench and fled. However, the machine gun fire of the German tanks and the squad machine guns of the infantry fired at them violently. Most of the British soldiers were killed. Only a few escaped. When the German army used tanks as an assault force, the British army's defense line could not last long at all. Within half an hour of the start of the battle, the British army's defense line became full of loopholes, and there were loopholes everywhere that the German army was about to break through. It can be said that the entire line of defense has become no different from a sieve. Your Excellency, the 1st Armored Division and 3rd Infantry Division have broken through the British defense line and are launching an attack in depth. A staff officer reported. Admiral Crook nodded. Order the 1st Armored Division to continue the assault and tear through the British defense in depth. In addition, let the 4th Infantry Division and the 5th Infantry Division follow up immediately. We need to be in the British defense zone interspersed inside, completely tearing apart their defenses. Yes, General. The staff officer immediately went to give the order. Before the battle began, General Crook, the commander of the 1st Army, moved his army headquarters from Calais to Margate, so that he could command the troops nearby. Judging from the current situation, the advance speed of the German army is quite gratifying. The British defense line has suffered heavy losses after being bombarded and bombed by the Germans. When faced with the fierce attack of the German armored forces, it was simply impossible to resist. After the armored forces tore through the front line of the British army, they did not stop, but continued to attack. Admiral Crook hoped that the armored forces could penetrate the British defense line directly and go around behind Canterbury. At the same time, the attack arrows composed of the 2nd Armored Division and the 2 infantry divisions of the German 2nd Army also tore through the defense line of the British 2nd Army and attacked all the way west. Although there are British defense lines along the way. However, under the support of our own strong firepower, the powerful assault force of the armored force was fully displayed, breaking through the British defense line one after another. At noon that day, the German 1st Armored Division defeated the British 4th Infantry Division and occupied App Street. It's not far from Canterbury. The German 2nd Armored Division also defeated the British 17th Infantry Division and captured an important stronghold in the southwest of Canterbury. The two armies, like two steel tongs, were pinching towards Canterbury. After resting for half an hour, the German 1st Armored Division and 2nd Armored Division continued to attack, after replenishing ammunition and fuel. However, as more and more tanks were lost, their attack speed gradually slowed down. Many tanks were not destroyed by the British anti-tank firepower during the battle, but were damaged due to malfunctions. Although, the performance of German tanks has been greatly improved. However, reliability is still a very headache. Especially in high-intensity battles, tanks are easily damaged due to mechanical failure. This kind of loss is already greater than the loss in the battle. Attack, hurry up and continue to attack. Before sunset today, we must hit Brünn. The commander of the German 1st Armored Division roared loudly. Yes, sir. The commander of the German 1st Armored Division roared loudly. Officers and soldiers replied one after another. Although they fought all the way, they suffered a lot of losses. However, more British troops were defeated and wiped out by them. In contrast, the losses of the British Army are undoubtedly much heavier. General, the 2nd Infantry Division has been defeated, and our defense zone has been penetrated by the Germans. A general reported to Admiral Haig. General Haig was completely speechless, and the German armored forces directly crushed their positions like a monster. The defense lines of 5 infantry divisions were breached successively, causing heavy losses. This caused the defense line of the entire British First Army to be torn apart. Send a telegram to the 6th Army and let them try their best to resist the German attack. Admiral Haig sighed. The Sixth Army is nothing more than a second-line force. Although the equipment is complete, but because the training time is too short and has not experienced the test of actual combat, the combat effectiveness is very limited. Even the First Army was easily penetrated by the Germans, let alone them. Admiral Haig did not report any hope for the performance of the Sixth Army. Yes, General. Sure enough, the performance of the British Sixth Army was much worse than that of the First Army, although their line of defense is relatively intact. However, after the bombers of the German Army Air Corps bombed, the armored forces broke through their defenses with only one charge. Subsequently, the German armored forces, like the **** of war possessed, easily broke through the British defense line one after another. In just 2 hours, the defense line of the British Sixth Army was broken through by the Germans. Along the way, more than 3 infantry divisions were defeated, and the number of prisoners reached tens of thousands. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the German 1st Armored Division had circled to the northwest of Canterbury and occupied Bryn. At the same time, the operation of the German 2nd Armored Division was also very smooth. After the defense line of the British 2nd Army was penetrated, the 7th Army behind it was completely vulnerable. Shortly after the German 1st Armored Division captured Bulling, the German 2nd Armored Division also did the same at Catmor, southwest of Canterbury. The 2 main armored divisions of the German army formed faint horns, cutting the British defense line into several pieces. The infantry of the German army, following behind the armored troops, further attacked the British army. Chapter 797, Crisis. Marshal, the 1st Army and 2nd Army have achieved their intended combat objectives in today's battle. With the support of the armored forces, the infantry successfully completed the penetration, and the entire British defense zone was cut apart. Yes, tomorrow, we can launch further attacks, and eliminate more British troops. Very well, the armored forces of the Imperial Army are indeed the most powerful. Marshal von Falkenhayn nodded in satisfaction. The British Army assembled millions of troops around Canterbury. However, under the fierce attack of the German army, it still failed to withstand it. This shows how powerful the German assault forces, the Marshal, the infantry of the 1st and 2nd Legions, are preparing to defend against the British counterattack. However, judging from the situation on the front line, after a large number of British troops have been defeated, they can't draw much strength in a short time. A counterattack has been launched. As soon as our attack begins, the British will be completely suppressed. Marshal von Falkenhayn nodded. Send a telegram to the Navy, and we still have to rely on them to launch shelling on the British Army tonight, to share the pressure on the Army. Yes, Marshal. At night, the fighter planes of the Army Air Force were unable to take off and land. Therefore, the important task of providing fire support to the Army fell to the Navy. Fortunately, the Navy's naval guns don't need to be affected, and they are almost all weather. As long as the Army provides the coordinates, they will be able to fire. Of course, the prerequisite is that it must be within the range of the Navy's naval guns. While Canterbury and its surrounding areas are some distance away from the sea, however, it is still within the range of the naval guns of the battleships of the German Navy. Those large caliber naval guns can still provide powerful fire support to the Army. How is the progress of the 3rd Army? Marshal von Falkenhayn asked. The 1st Army and the 2nd Army served as the main force, and fought a decisive battle with the main force of the British Army in the Canterbury area. The 3rd Army mainly played a diversionary role, because of its small number of troops. Marshal, the 3rd Army has already approached Ashford during today's attack. 3rd Army and 8th Army are retreating. If the 3rd Army hadn't controlled the advancing speed, it is estimated that it will be soon. Can hit Maidstone. That's good. Before the 1st Army and the 2nd Army can deal with the main forces of the British, as long as the 3rd Army firmly holds back the 2 British armies, it will be the greatest victory. Von Falkenhayn said the Marshal. The current battle situation is developing in favor of the German army. Although, in today's battle, the number of enemies wiped out is not many. However, the main strategic objectives have been achieved. Next, it's time to reap the results. As long as the German offensive goes well, there will be no problem in winning this war. The 8th Army of the German army has been on standby. Unless it is absolutely necessary, it will not be dispatched easily. Marshal von Falkenhayn hoped that the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd armies could be used to eliminate all the troops in the southeastern theatre of the British Continental Army. Canterbury, British Continental Army Southeast Theatre Command. Although it was already night, the underground headquarters was still brightly lit, and it was as lively as a vegetable market. Admiral Haig and Admiral Benson both rushed to the headquarters. They are very dissatisfied with today's battle, Your Excellency. The Germans have already occupied Bryn and Kamet respectively. If they wish, they can even cut off our connection with London. This will be a disaster for us. Therefore, we can no longer just sit back and watch the situation worsen. Admiral Haig looked angry. General Hamilton refused to send tank troops to fight, which made the German army easily break through the British defense line, which caused this situation. This made Admiral Haig even more dissatisfied with Admiral Hamilton. Yes, Your Excellency Commander. We must launch a counterattack and wipe out the intruding Germans in one fell swoop. Otherwise, the consequences will be disastrous. Admiral Benson also had a serious face. Admiral Hamilton's face was as dark as the bottom of a pot. Of course he could hear the accusations of Admiral Haig and Admiral Benson. Although he is the commander of the local army, he also serves as the commander of the theater. And Haig and Benson are just the commanders of the group army. In terms of position, he is much worse than him. However, the military ranks of both sides are the same. Therefore, if Haig and Benson really don't give him face, he has no good way to take them. No, the attacking power of the Germans is indeed too strong, far beyond our expectations. However, our troops did not suffer too much loss in today's battle. Therefore, although the situation is not good for us, unfavorable, however, it is not so bad that we must lose. Admiral Hamilton quibbled. Your Excellency, Commander, the Germans have completed their scheduled combat deployment. Their large-scale offensive will probably begin soon. At that time, will the chaotic army be able to withstand the German offensive? In this regard, I'm very suspicious. Admiral Haig sneered. General Hamilton was taken aback for a moment, and then said, in this case, then immediately organize troops to launch a counterattack, and eliminate all the German troops. Your Excellency, Commander, this is probably very difficult. The German army has strong firepower, which allows them to use their powerful firepower to inflict heavy losses on us when defending. The previous battles have undoubtedly proved this point. In addition, although our losses in today's battle are not large, more than 15 infantry divisions were routed, and a large amount of weapons and equipment were lost. At the same time, the morale of the troops has also seriously dropped. Under such circumstances, counterattack is obviously impossible, Admiral Benson said. Then what should we do now? Admiral Hamilton was a little anxious. He also seemed to understand that the current situation was very dangerous for them. It was even more dangerous than he imagined. Your Excellency, Commander, tomorrow morning, we must organize a strong force to launch a counterattack and defeat the Germans. Otherwise, we will lose. Admiral Haig said. General Haig, do you mean to dispatch tank troops? Admiral Hamilton frowned. Yes, Commander, this is our only chance. Admiral Haig insisted. Admiral Hamilton thought for a while, and finally nodded. Chapter 798, Tank Duel. The British Army has 500 tanks in Canterbury. These tanks were all transferred from London after the battle started. In addition, there are 500 in London. The Hound Dog tank of the British Army is roughly the same in shape as the French Renault 17 tank. Lightweight, weakly armored, and relatively fast. It is armed with a 37mm tank gun and a 7.62mm machine gun. The performance of the Hound Dog tank is not far behind the German No. 1 tank. The tank guns of both sides can destroy the other side's tanks. However, in terms of reliability and mobility, the British Hound Dog tank is much worse. If the quality and experience of the tanks of the two sides are added, the gap is even greater. General Haig, launch a counterattack early tomorrow morning. All tanks will be put in. The infantry will be drawn from the First Army. This time, we must defeat the Germans in one fell swoop. General Hamilton ordered with a dark face. Yes, Your Excellency, Commander. Admiral Haig replied. So, shall we choose to attack the German army at Breen, or the German army at Kamet? Admiral Benson asked. Hamilton thought for a while, and then said, attack Britain's German army first, and then attack Hammond's German army. The German army is too strong, and we can no longer disperse our attack power. In that case, we will only be defeated by the Germans one by one. Admiral Benson nodded, and didn't say much. Admiral Hamilton this time, obviously intends to do his best, and put all his eggs in one basket. He also knew that the situation this time was very critical for the British army. If they don't do it well, they will be defeated in this battle. In the early morning of September 1st, 4 armored brigades and 3 infantry divisions of the British army launched an attack on Britain. Before the attack, the British army even assembled more than 500 artillery pieces to bombard Britain fiercely. You must know that the British artillery suffered a lot during the battle. It was either suppressed and destroyed by the German artillery, or it was blown up by the fighter planes of the German Army Air Corps. The artillery suffered heavy losses and there were not many left. In order to be able to take Britain smoothly, the British army can be regarded as using the main force. Boom. 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 A door of 114mm howitzers and 83.8mm field guns, pouring shells crazily. Hurry up and fire the shells at your maximum speed. Otherwise, we will have to evacuate when the German planes come. The artillery commander of the British army ordered. The British artillery knew that their bombardment would soon be bombed by the German Army Air Force. Therefore, they can only hurry up and fire. If you are bombed in time, you can no longer continue to fire. The artillery shells hit the German positions fiercely, leaving craters one by one. The artillery shells hit the German positions fiercely, leaving craters one by one. Hastily built fortifications last night could not withstand the violent shelling of the British army at all. Under the fierce shelling of the British army, the German army began to suffer a lot of casualties. Urgently call for reinforcement. We need to suppress the British artillery. Otherwise, we will suffer heavy losses under their bombardment. The commander of the 1st Armored Division ordered. On the sea, 10 battleships and 24 former dreadnoughts of the German Navy have already raised their muzzles high. According to the coordinates sent by the army, they are making adjustments before firing. Fire. Following the command of the guns on the Bavaria battleship, 3 triple-mounted 380mm main guns with 50 times the caliber began a violent shelling. The other battleships also followed suit and started shelling. All of a sudden, the sound of cannons rumbled across the sea. One after another, large caliber naval gun shells slammed into the artillery positions of the British army. Hoo, hoo. Sharp and piercing whistling sounded from the artillery positions of the British army, and the expressions of the artillerymen of the British army changed drastically. They have dealt with cannons all year round, so they naturally know what it means. Run. The Germans' large caliber naval guns. Without the need for an officer to give orders, the British artillerymen fled in all directions like rabbits. Boom. Violent explosions sounded on the artillery positions of the British army. The cannons were blown up and down, and even the barrels were blown into twists. As for the artillery, they were directly torn into pieces. The bombardment of the German Navy's naval guns certainly caused heavy losses to the British artillery. However, the biggest threat to them is still the German Army Air Force. Hundreds of F-2 fighters covered hundreds of H-1 bombers to bomb the British artillery positions. British artillery positions were destroyed one after another. Damn it. Admiral Haig saw this situation and couldn't help but cursed. Their artillery was almost lost before it had time to play a big role. This undoubtedly made this battle even more difficult to fight. We can't wait any longer. Order the tank troops to attack immediately. Admiral Haig ordered. Yes, General. Although their shelling did not cause much damage to the German army, it was far from reaching the intended goal. But Admiral Haig knew that he couldn't wait any longer. At that time, more and more German aircraft will appear on the battlefield, and their losses will also increase. Attack. After receiving the order, the tank troops of the British Army immediately launched an attack. More than 500 tanks rushed out of the position and rushed towards the German position. General, tanks. The British dispatched a large number of tanks. A staff officer ordered the commander of the German 1st Armored Division. So many tanks. The British paid a lot of money this time. Order anti-tank weapons to get ready. First consume the British tanks. Then the armored forces will attack again and finish them off. Although, after the hard fighting of the 1st Armored Division yesterday, there were only more than 170 tanks left, which was only equivalent to 1/3 of the tanks dispatched by the British Army. However, they are not afraid. Compared with the German armored forces, the British tank force is nothing more than a toddler, and the gap between the two sides is too great. A series of anti-tank guns were deployed to the front line positions. The anti-tank soldiers aimed at the rapidly advancing British tanks. Fire. Boom. An anti-tank gun opened fire. The 37mm artillery shell roared and fired at a hound dog tank of the British Army. The distance of several hundred meters is reached in the blink of an eye. The armor-piercing projectile slammed into the armor of the tank. Under the action of huge kinetic energy, the armor-piercing projectile easily penetrated the not-so-thick armor of the hound dog tank. The shell hit the ammunition compartment, and a sacrificial explosion occurred. The whole tank became a ball of fire. Chapter 799. Disabled. Boom. 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 The German anti-tank guns fired continuously, and the British tanks were shot into fireballs one by one. The power of the 37mm anti-tank gun is enough to penetrate the thin armor of the hound dog tank at a distance of thousands of meters. However, in order to ensure the hit rate, the combat distance was set to a few hundred meters. The number of anti-tank guns equipped by the German army is not many, but it is also quite a lot. Even an ordinary infantry company will be equipped with 2 doors. Anti-tank guns can be used not only to destroy enemy armored targets, but also to deal with bunkers or machine gun fire points, etc., which are very useful. It is precisely because of this that the German army's anti-armor strength is very strong. This directly made the attack of the British tank troops as if they had hit an iron plate. Boom. A British hound dog tank opened fire, and a shell flew towards the German position. But unfortunately, it was not able to hit the target. But when it fired, it was hit by a German anti-tank gun. Dang. The armor-piercing projectile fired by the anti-tank gun slammed into the front armor of the tank. The fragile armor was torn apart in an instant. The fragments exploded in the small space inside the tank, killing the tank soldiers inside. Under the fierce firepower of the German anti-tank guns, the losses of the British tank troops began to rise sharply. Admiral Haig observed all this with a telescope. When he watched the losses of the British tank troops increasing, his face turned as dark as the bottom of a pot. Originally, he had great confidence in the tank force, thinking that hundreds of tanks launched an attack, no matter what, they could break through the German defense line and defeat them. But now it seems that it is useless at all. Those tanks have been beaten into flaming scrap iron. God, how could the Germans be equipped with so many anti-tank guns? How could their anti-tank guns be so powerful? Admiral Hamilton's face was also very ugly. He used to regard these tanks as treasures before, but he did not expect that, after entering the battlefield, they would appear so vulnerable. Your Excellency, the German anti-tank firepower is too strong. I'm afraid it will be difficult for our tank troops to achieve the expected combat objectives. Admiral Haig had to give Admiral Hamilton a vaccination in advance. This immediately made Admiral Hamilton's face even uglier. If the attack of the British tank unit fails, their counterattack will also face failure. Then, the battle situation will be very unfavorable to the British Army. I'm afraid that the entire Southeast Theatre will suffer heavy losses in this battle, and the defeat will be crushing. Boom. An anti-tank artillery shell hit a British tank. However, perhaps because of the angle, the shell did not penetrate the armor of the tank, but flew out. However, the crisp impact sound scared the tank soldiers hiding inside out of their wits. My god. We got hit. Fortunately, it was not penetrated, otherwise, we would be dead. Damn, get out of here. We can't go any further. If we go any further, we'll be destroyed by the Germans. The tank soldiers who survived in this tank immediately reached a consensus. Regardless of the orders from their superiors, they forcibly turned the tank around, trying to escape from the battlefield. At this time, the British tank troops are attacking forward. This tank wants to go retrograde, and the consequences can be imagined. In a panic, this tank had a loading accident with another tank. Moreover, it also caused multiple tank collision accidents. This made the formation of the British tank troops even more chaotic. The changes in the British tank unit immediately attracted the attention of the German army. The commander of the German 1st Armored Division immediately gave the order to attack. The German armored forces, already gearing up for a long time, rushed out of the trenches and entered the battlefield. Boom. Boom. The tank guns of the tanks fired, hitting the British tanks into fireballs. A distance of several hundred meters is easy for these tanks to hit the target. This is undoubtedly a disaster for the British tank troops. After the German armored units entered the battlefield, a large number of British tanks were destroyed in an instant, causing the losses of the British tank units to soar. My God. The German tank troops have appeared. Quickly resist them, General Hamilton exclaimed after seeing this scene. However, the British tank force, which was already in chaos, has been completely beaten in the face of huge losses. When they saw the dark German tanks rushing like tigers, they didn't think of fighting, but turned around and ran away immediately. This makes the situation on the battlefield very strange. The British tanks still have a numerical advantage, but they are defeated by the German tanks, especially after those tanks finished turning and pointed their butts at the German tanks. They were completely slaughtered. A large number of tanks were pierced from behind by German tanks and became a pile of scrap iron. When the German armored forces were chasing and killing the British tanks, fighter planes from the German Army Air Force also came to help. Hundreds of H-1 bombers flew over the heads of the British tank troops and dropped bombs. One bomb after another fell like dumplings, and there were intensive explosions on the ground. Although these tanks are all 25 kg light aerial bombs, they pose a deadly threat to the British tanks. If hit directly, it will be blown up on the spot. Even if the bomb explodes next to the tank, the shrapnel can easily tear apart the weak armor. Under the intensive bombing of the German Army Air Force, a large number of British tanks were directly destroyed. This made the remaining tank soldiers even more scared out of their wits. They drove at full speed and wanted to escape from the battlefield, but they didn't have any courage to fight on. The first large-scale operation of the British tank force can be described as a fiasco. They were jointly attacked by the German armored forces and the Army Air Force, and suffered extremely heavy losses. When attacking, there were more than 500 tanks. However, the number of tanks that were safely withdrawn was less than 100. The rest of the tanks had been destroyed. More importantly, the confidence of the British tank troops was completely destroyed in this battle. Those tank soldiers did not dare to enter the tank at all, let alone fight the German army. This also made the British Army's desperate counter-attack end in failure. Chapter 800. Ask for help. General, shall we continue to attack? Asked the commander of the British 3rd Infantry Division. Originally, they received the order that after the tank troops broke through the German defense line, the infantry would launch an attack, regain the positions occupied by the German troops in one fell swoop, and destroy those German troops. But now, their tank unit has been almost disabled in the battle. If the infantry is allowed to attack again, it is no different from letting them die. Therefore, the commander of the 3rd Infantry Division was afraid that Generals Hamilton and Haig would give them orders to continue their offensive. General Hamilton did not speak. The disastrous defeat of the tank unit made him lose all confidence. Temporarily suspend the plan, Admiral Haig said. It is obviously impossible for him to let the troops die in vain. Yes, General. The commander of the 3rd Infantry Division breathed a sigh of relief, and the heart that had been hanging around was finally put back in his stomach. The British offensive ended in an anticlimactic manner. The heavy loss made their plan come to nothing. Moreover, the current battle situation is even more unfavorable for them. After returning to the headquarters, Admiral Hamilton's face became even uglier. General Haig, the fighting power of the Germans is so powerful that it has completely exceeded our expectations. Even the attack of the tank troops failed. Then, we are afraid that we will lose this battle. Admiral Hamilton said, somewhat desperate. Originally, he wanted to defeat the German army in one fell swoop in this battle and win a big victory. But now it seems that he imagined everything too simply. The strength of the German army directly shattered their hopes. Your Excellency, Commander, it is indeed very difficult for us to win this battle. It can even be said that the hope is extremely slim. I'm afraid we have to prepare for failure. Admiral Haig sighed tone. He also knows how much loss it will cause to Britain if the Southeast Theater fails in this big battle. Not only will hundreds of thousands or even millions of troops be lost, but the flames of war will also be directly spread to London. At that time, the British Army will have even less room for maneuver. Is there any other way to reverse the situation? Admiral Hamilton seemed a little unwilling. Your Excellency, Commander, now we can only take a defensive position. It is foreseeable that the Germans will start a large-scale offensive soon. We can only eliminate their vital forces as much as possible while on the defensive. Only in this way will it be possible to reverse the situation. After all, the biggest weakness of the Germans is that they have too few troops. In terms of military strength, we always have the advantage, Admiral Haig said. Admiral Hamilton nodded and accepted Admiral Haig's suggestion. Besides, he really didn't know what to do. Your Excellency, Commander, if possible, we'd better be able to draw some reinforcement from other theaters. With our current strength alone, it is impossible to resist the German attack. If there are reinforcements to respond, once the battle situation is unfavorable, we can also withdraw the main force instead of losing too much in the southeast theater. Admiral Haig then suggested, I will report to London. Admiral Hamilton naturally knew that it would be great if he could have another batch of reinforcement, but he also knew that it would be very difficult to get London to transfer the troops that originally London. After the British counterattack was crushed, the German attack began as planned. The main force of the German First Army and Second Army, with the assistance of the armored forces, launched frequent attacks, constantly tearing apart the British defense line, and defended then interspersed and surrounded them, destroying them during the battle. The fierce attack of the German army immediately caused the losses of the British army to rise sharply. One after another infantry divisions were disabled and surrounded. Many British troops had to raise their hands to the Germans when they were desperate. Although, the belief in defending the country gave these British soldiers great spiritual encouragement. However, the situation of the battle was so unsatisfactory that they didn't have much confidence to continue fighting. Especially after the armored forces of the German army were supplemented and a strong assault force was restored, the situation facing the British army was even worse. The battle situation in the entire southeast theater has been completely corrupted. The defeat of the British army here is even more inevitable. On the entire day of September 1st, the British army lost more than 100,000 people. Among them, not many were actually killed by the German army, and most of them surrendered. At the same time, many troops were defeated and had lost the courage to continue fighting. On September 2nd, the British army once again suffered heavy losses under the indiscriminate bombing of the German army. When they encountered the attack of the German armored forces, they collapsed at the touch of a touch. Your Excellency, Commander, we can't go on like this. The First Army has now lost more than half of its troops. The rest of the troops have no fighting spirit. Under such circumstances, it is impossible for us to resist the German attack. Admiral Haig looked frustrated. General Haig, do you mean we are abandoning the southeast theater? Admiral Hamilton asked. Yes, Your Excellency Commander. While we still have hundreds of thousands of troops, evacuate here immediately. Go back to London and strengthen the defense of London. In this way, it may be possible to hold off the Germans in London. If you don't go, as the losses get bigger and bigger, it is very likely that we will not be able to go. Admiral Haig insisted. Your Excellency, Commander, it is best to let London send reinforcement to meet us. Otherwise, we may not be able to break through the German blockade. Admiral Benson continued. The German army has assembled heavy troops in the northwest of Canterbury. 2 armored divisions and 4 infantry divisions, with a strong force of more than 100,000 people, seem to be a city wall, cutting the connection between the southeastern theatre of the British Army and London. Can the 3rd Army or the 8th Army be mobilized from Folkestone to reinforce us? Admiral Hamilton asked. He had already contacted London before, hoping to get reinforcement. However, Richard Haldane, Secretary of State for War, rejected him on the grounds that London's defenses were strained. Your Excellency, the 3rd Army and the 8th Army have also been held back by the Germans. If they are deployed rashly, their front line may collapse. Admiral Benson said. Okay, I will contact London again and request to send reinforcement to pick us up. Admiral Hamilton said. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.